The webinar is now live.
Okay. Well, welcome to the Environmental Quality Commission meeting here on July 21st. Just as a reminder, this is a teleconference meeting with the EQC members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. We will begin with roll call, but first we are very excited to welcome a new member, Angela Evans. So welcome, Commissioner Angela Evans. You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to hopefully contributing in a positive way.
It's fantastic. We're very excited that you're here.
Thank you.
And then we will do a roll call to introduce the commissioners, followed by the staff members present. So Commissioner Elkins.
Present.
Commissioner Cabot.
Present.
Commissioner London.
Present.
Commissioner Evans.
Present.
I am Ryan Price. I'm the current chair of the EQC, and we also are expecting Commissioner Payne to arrive late. And so at this point, that's all of the EQC members who are here at the meeting. We can, of course, welcome anybody new who comes in or joins us later. We also have the Sustainability Manager, Rebecca Lucky. So I'll introduce Rebecca and invite her to share instructions for the EQC members as well as the public on how this meeting will proceed.
Thank you, Chair Price, and welcome again, members of the commission and members of the public to our July 21st regular Environmental Quality Commission meeting. At this time, we do ask, or I ask, that all members of the commission remain on camera during the duration of the meeting, and staff will engage the camera and the microphone to address questions or to provide further facilitation of the discussion. And for the members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, you may do so when the chair calls for public comment. There should be a hand feature that you can access next to your name in the participants list. And if you raise that, we'll be able to unmute your microphone and you can provide up to 3 minutes of public comment at that time. If you're on a landline or a phone, you can use the *9 feature to raise your hand, and I'll be able to unmute your microphone as well. And this concludes my instructions. I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So the first on our agenda, we can take public comment. So under public comment, the public may address the EQC on any subject that's not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the EQC once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. And so we just ask that you please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. And as a reminder, the EQC cannot act on items that are not listed on the agenda. Therefore, the EQC cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment, other than to provide general information. The floor is now open for public comment. Rebecca, do we have any public comments to consider at this time?
Thank you, Chair Price. So again, if you'd like to provide public comment, you can use the raised hand feature next to your name in the participants list. And if you're on a landline, you can press *9 and I'll be able to unmute your microphone. And at this time, I do not see any hands raised. So I can return the meeting back to you, Chair Price. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So then we can move on to our regular business. The first item, under regular business, the EQC considers providing advice to City Council on sustainability policy matters or administrative actions that require City Council decision. The first item on our agenda is to approve the May 2021 meeting minutes. So I am introducing that item here and asking if there are any clarifying questions from EQC members prior to taking public comment on this item. Oh, welcome, Commissioner Gaylor.
Hi, sorry. Either I didn't get the link or I couldn't find it.
It's okay. We have Tom Cabot 1 and Tom Cabot 2. Yes, Commissioner Elkins.
I just wanted to make ask a clarifying question about this word coloration in where it says in the minutes under D2. Well, that's the agenda number actually. Am I looking at the right? Yeah, under D2, Peter Edmonds spoke in support of former Mayor Mueller's coloration. And I'm assuming
I think that's a typo for collaboration.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I couldn't exactly remember the comment, but I figured it must mean collaboration. Okay, that's it. That was my only clarifying question.
Thank you. Are there any other clarifying questions before we take public comment? I don't see any hands. Okay, so turning back to you, Rebecca, do we have any public comment on this item at this time?
Thank you, Chair Price. So the floor is now open for public comment on the approval of the May 2021 minutes. If you would like to make public comment, please use the raised hand feature next to your name. If you're on a landline, you can use the *9 feature and I will be able to see your hand raised and unmute your microphone. And with that, we do have one public comment. Mr. Peter Edmonds, I have unmuted you, so you should be able to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Lucky. As you know, I sent you email about the word coloration in the minutes as has been already mentioned. And in your answer, you agreed that the word negotiation was the better substitution for coloration. And I'd like to confirm that. I listened to the recording of the last meeting and I heard nothing within that recording that bore any resemblance to coloration, but I did say negotiation at that point, and that is a word that captures the gist of my public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonds. Duly noted. Are there any other public comments at this time?
I do not see any further public comments. Return the meeting back to you.
Okay. So with that, we can just, does anybody have any discussion points they'd like to raise regarding the meeting minutes? Was somebody willing to put a motion forward to approve the minutes pending the change of the word coloration to negotiation?
I move to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
No, I second.
No, I'll second. We both second.
Excellent. So if we have a motion, we have a second, now we can move to a roll call vote. So I will turn that to Ms. Lucky.
Sure, I'm sorry, I didn't catch who made the motion first. I'm having a bit of
It was I.
difficulties here.
Commissioner
Okay,
Taylor made the motion, and we had a tie for a second between Commissioner London and Commissioner Elkins, who said it at the same time.
So I'll go with the alphabetical order. Elkins. Next time, Commissioner London. All right, with that, the motion on the floor is to approve the May 2021 minutes and obviously fixing the correction in regards to the public comment for the approval of the minutes. With that, do you agree with that motion? Commissioner Elkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Commissioner Cabot? Commissioner Cabot?
Aye.
Commissioner Evans? Oh, I think you're on mute, Commissioner Evans.
Apologies. Aye.
Commissioner London?
Aye.
Commissioner Gillard?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. We can now move on to item D2. This item is about selecting a chair and vice chair for essentially the next year is typically the format. Do we have any clarifying questions from the commission prior to taking public comment? I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to take that as a no. Rebecca, do we have any public comment on this item at this time?
Thank you, Commissioner Price. So at this time, if you would like to make public comment on the election of the chair or vice chair of the commission, you can do so by raising your hand, which is the feature next to your name in the participant list. And if you're on a landline, again, you can press *9 and I'll be able to unmute your microphone. And with that, I do not see any hands raised. You may continue, Commissioner Price.
Thank you very much. So now we can turn, oops, sorry, my headphone fell out. We can turn the meeting back to our commission to discuss the chair and vice chair. Before we do that, I'll just share a little bit of context as we start the conversation. So historically, how this process has worked is that oftentimes we have the commission always has a chair and a vice chair. Typically, that person serves for a year. Typically, what has historically happened is the person in the vice chair role then becomes the chair. However, last year at the time of the election, and this may have changed, but at the time of the election, when Janelle joined as vice chair, she joined under the agreement that she would not the next following year become the chair for various reasons and commitment and things like that. So we are not following tradition. So this is really an open conversation about how we would like to form the leadership of the commission moving forward. I've been in this role for a little bit of time now, and I'm open to not serving as the chair, or as the group would like to see having new leadership come in. It's really open, but I just wanted to start by saying that's typically how that process works. In terms of a commitment and what you're talking about, the chair's and vice chair's job, in addition to serving as a commission, typically includes a call to set the agenda. Usually it's once a month. And so that's an ongoing commitment that you have in addition to the meetings, is to make sure that the agenda is set. And then I would say from my personal experience, it is likely that you have more outreach to you when you are serving in a chair or vice chair role. However, that's not necessarily true. And so that's also a possibility. So with all that information, we can have a discussion. If people have thoughts on or questions, we should start the conversation about a vice chair and chair for the next year.
One question I have is, I think James, with his family situation, wasn't ready to step into the chair role. Does anyone kind of check in with him or hear from him about that?
I have not heard from him on it.
Okay.
And he is not here, although he should be joining soon to discuss it. But I think that that is something that came up because James was previously the vice chair for the year prior to Janelle.
Yeah, so the way we tentatively talked about it was he was sort of he was on that track, but sort of had taken a year out and maybe would come back and slot into the role, which I would be open to, but obviously he's not here, so he can't tell us whether he's interested.
Are you saying, sorry, Tom, are you saying he would slot into the chair role or back into the vice chair role?
I was thinking into the chair role. He's done the vice chair role, so he's pretty familiar, I think. So I would feel comfortable with that, but obviously he has to want to do it.
Do we want to table this or push it put it in out of order and wait for him to come back? To wait for him to come to the meeting?
We can do that.
Okay.
So we are going to table this discussion. That's the recommended motion until James joins the conversation at a future time. Janelle, I know that you also are going to be leaving the meeting early. So before we officially do that, is there anything that you wanted to mention just in case James doesn't join until you have left the meeting?
Sure. Couple things. One is for the newer folks. In my, I believe it was my very first or second meeting as an EQC commissioner, I did become vice chair, and I was a little scared about that, but it turned out to be not a big deal at all. It was totally fine. And then I went from there into the chairmanship. So I've played both of those roles and will play them at, usually I think it's once every 4 years you play them. Well, anyway, we rotate among everyone. So I'm happy to do it again. I just cannot do it this year. And I'm also happy to stay in the vice chair role if that's needed. So that's kind of where I am. And I just want to encourage you guys, even if you're relatively new or brand spanking new, that vice chair is a great way to really get to know what goes on here. And it is not at all a big time commitment, nor is it scary or anything that you are not prepared to do.
Thank you, Janelle. I agree. And I also joined the commission and then was a vice chair very quickly. So I agree with everything that Janelle said.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that, did you want to?
Oh, yes. I'm the brand spanking new person that I think is being referred to. I mean, I think I'm looking to really go deep on electrification efforts. And I know that's later for the agenda, but that's where I'm looking to prioritize a bunch of my time. But that said, if there's a need and it's not being filled, then I'm happy to go in. But that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cabot, did you?
Yes, related to what Commissioner Evans just raised, are we able to have people join subcommittees in this meeting?
I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, but I believe if we had a new commissioner join, that commissioner, especially if there's a committee that does not have capacity and the people here. So my quick answer would be yes. I think there could be some situations that would maybe not be a yes. But for example, if it involved, if we wanted to include a member who wasn't here in a decision for them to leave a commission or something like that. But if that's not the case, I would anticipate the answer is yes.
And I would just add that as long as it's related to the agenda item that is being presented, then there's the transparency that's doable.
Okay, so if I'm interested, I can wait till that agenda item to bring that topic up, as opposed to right now.
Well, I think, Rebecca, you're saying this is the agenda item, correct?
No, it's so later on in the agenda, we're going to be discussing the cost effectiveness analysis for building electrification, and it would fit in best there.
Okay, got it.
And I think it's important to, sometimes there's different contexts to mention things. And so mentioning it is one thing, but voting on it or approving it is another thing. And so right now is a good time to mention it, but later on is a time when we would potentially formalize it and then have a motion on it if that's where we went.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So did anybody else want to say anything before we decide to table this agenda item until Commissioner Payne arrives? I think that means no. And we also did have a couple of members of the public who joined the meeting a little bit late. And so I wanted to make sure if it was comfortable with everybody that we could return to public comment, just to make sure that we didn't have anybody who, because we moved so quickly, may have missed their opportunity for public comment.
Thank you, Chair Price. So we are reopening the floor for any public comment on an item that is not on the agenda. If you would like to speak on a topic that's not on the agenda, you can use the raised hand feature next to your name and you'll be able to unmute your microphone. If you're on a landline, you could press *9 and I'll also be able to unmute your microphone so you can address the commission with your comments or feedback or questions for up to 3 minutes. And with that, I do have one hand raised and I am going to unmute Mr. Steve Schmidt. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes,
Hi,
we
this
can.
is Steve Schmidt, and I'm a member of the equivalent committee here in Los Altos Hills. I just want to commend you all for doing such a great job taking a leadership role in the climate action plan. You're being very bold and it's wonderful, and a lot of us are watching and hope to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very thoughtful of you, Steve. We really appreciate it.
With that, I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay. Well, we will then transition our meeting down to agenda item D3. I believe Rebecca Lucky, our sustainability manager, is going to introduce this item. So I will turn the meeting over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair Price. So it's my pleasure to introduce Candace Almendro, who's a contractor with the City of Menlo Park. She's worked on various climate action plan related projects, such as EV charging, infrastructure analysis for the community. And over the last few months, she's been working on our progress report on our CAP actions. And it's a very comprehensive report. It's probably one of the biggest reports that we've done on reporting on the climate action plan. So it's quite detailed. And so I am going to hand this over to Ms. Candace Almendro to provide you with a brief presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Ms. Lucky. Good evening, commissioners. I hope you're well, staying cool during all of this hot weather we've been having. Give me a moment to share my screen. Sorry, I just saw the expression on my face. Is everyone able to see my screen okay? Perfect. As Ms. Lucky mentioned, this is a comprehensive, or our best effort at the most comprehensive climate action plan progress report that the city has provided thus far. Just to kind of walk you through from the beginning, at a high level and historically, the city has measured its climate action progress through a community-wide emissions, a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. This is reflected in the 2020 adopted goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2030, which is the main goal of the 2030 climate action plan. And this is just kind of an overview of the community-wide emissions as of 2019, which is the most current data set available. As you can see in the donut, for lack of a better word, it's a variation of a pie chart. The main contributors to the community greenhouse gas emissions are pretty evenly split between natural gas consumption and our transportation related emissions. Thankfully, though, the most recent 2019 data shows that the community-wide emissions have decreased to 253,371, which is 27.5% lower than the 2005 baseline. So that it means that the city has accomplished its 2020 goal of 27% reduction relative to 2005 levels as of 2019. So well done, guys. Just to kind of break it out further, here's a line graph of each measured category. The blue line is the transportation emissions I mentioned. The green line is natural gas consumption. The yellow line is electricity, and the orange line is solid waste related emissions, just so that we can kind of get an overall view of the breadth and depth of trends that are happening in the community. Just to mention and highlight the natural gas consumption and the electricity consumption are direct emissions that we can actually measure from the actual natural gas and electricity that's being consumed and used in the community. So those, I think, are the most relevant and true and reflexive of our immediate action, which is why you can see the tremendous drop in 2017 related to the big switch to Peninsula Clean Energy provision. It was a 75% drop in a single year from that single measure. So just to kind of review the 60-page report, I thought we'd go through strategy by strategy and just kind of talk about each project and effort related to those strategies and the kind of metrics or things that we're measuring within. Are there any kind of clarifying questions about the community-wide greenhouse gas inventory before we move on to the climate action plan strategies? Perfect.
Yes, sorry, I have one.
Okay, great.
Thanks. Okay, so
Commissioner Linden.
yes, I'm just noticing that we call natural gas, natural gas, kind of like we name the fossil fuel. And then we call this other category transportation. But is that really, could we, if we named it by its fossil fuel, would it be like gasoline/diesel, or are we considering other types of transportation fossil fuels?
You're absolutely right, Commissioner London, and I was thinking about both the name of the transportation category and the natural gas category, just because natural gas is kind of a little bit of a misnomer. I know it's a commercial term to make it seem, nicer than
right.
So that's an excellent point, and I think it's something that may be worth discussing, because the transportation sector just does reflect the vehicle emissions. So it would be fossil fuel related, gasoline and diesel only is what we track.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Any other clarifying questions? Great. So, oh, here we go. Clicking the wrong string. I apologize. There we go. So climate action plan strategy number 1 is explore policy and program options to convert 95% of existing buildings to all electric by 2030. So, as I'm sure you're aware, but just as a reminder, the city did adopt in 2019 what they call REACH codes, above and beyond state requirements, for new construction related to electrification, with very few exceptions. So it requires all new construction, both commercial and residential, to be all electric. So in answer to that, and again, to capture the significant emissions reductions related to having electricity provided by Peninsula Clean Energy, the city is currently exploring and is on track to accomplish all of the milestones related to convert existing buildings and capture those kind of same emissions reductions. And this is just kind of a discrete trend of the green line is commercial building natural gas consumption, and the blue line is residential natural gas consumption, just to kind of see that it's been pretty flat, and then the commercial has really ramped up in the last 3 to 4 years, probably a reflection of increased development in that sector. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we're on track and what it looks like, and the potential emissions reductions around that. The related sustained climate action plan metrics that have been adopted are conversion of gas hot water heaters, conversion of gas furnaces, and also the termination of natural gas accounts. We were able to find specific data points to 1 and 2 with some caveats. But the third one is currently not available. For more details, it's out. All of this is pretty laid out, and there's a extensive narrative in the climate action plan progress report. But just to kind of mention what we have that's related and how we're tracking that, I thought that the natural gas consumption was a pretty descriptive way of showing the potential of the reductions there. Is there any clarifying questions about Climate Action Plan Strategy number 1 or the progress that's been made? Sorry, including the cost effectiveness study that you're going to be reviewing in the next item. Okay, looking good. So we're going to move on to Climate Action Plan Strategy number 2, which is setting a citywide goal for increasing electric vehicles to 100% of all new vehicles by 2025 and decreasing gasoline sales 10% a year. And I believe that's over a 2018 baseline. Sorry, I didn't make that notation. So implementation for this strategy was deferred to the Beyond Gas initiative under the joint venture Silicon Valley. But just to kind of give us a baseline of where Menlo Park is at and the trends, we have been able to synthesize or get the synthesized data, the Department of Motor Vehicles data, to reflect just kind of where Menlo Park is at in 2020. Still a significant amount of fossil fuel vehicles, which is the kind of mint colored portions of the graph. We have both the newly registered vehicles as well as the total registered vehicles in the community. The goldenrod color represents, oh shoot. Sorry, the goldenrod color represents all electric. It should be all electric in both. I apologize. Let me just, yeah, I apologize. So on the left, the goldenrod color represents the full battery electric vehicles. On the right, under registered vehicles, unfortunately, they don't match. And the brown represents fully electric vehicles. The smaller wedge on the left, the brown, is the plug-in hybrid, which is considered in the state of California as a zero emissions vehicle, which is why I included it in the calculation. And on the right, unfortunately, the plug-in hybrid is gold. And I apologize for that, and I will correct that typo. So as you can see, there is a very promising adoption rate of full battery electric vehicles in the city of Menlo Park. And these charts reflect Climate Action Plan metric 4, which is percentage of newly registered vehicles, electric versus fossil fuel, and Climate Action Plan metric number 5, total registered vehicles, full battery electric versus fossil fuel. Another related metric is the estimated total gallons of gasoline sold in Menlo Park, which is currently estimated by the city. And again, for full details, that is included in the Climate Action Plan progress report, with as many years as we've been estimating the fossil fuel sales in the city. Are there any questions about Climate Action Plan Strategy number 2 or kind of the status of that? Hey, Janelle.
Just for the gallons of gasoline coming from Menlo Park retail fueling stations per year, do you guys have that it's about, is it like 15 or 16 million gallons?
For 20, so I'm kind of disregarding a little bit 2020 data just because it's going to be such an outlier. So for the 2019 data total, including diesel and gasoline, the estimation is almost 14 million gallons. So it's 13,780,434 and some change.
Just wanted to alert you to the fact that the California Energy Commission has now published on its website gasoline consumption at the city level for the first time. Literally that popped up for the first time this week. So you can easily just check the Energy Commission's website, and for any city, you can find out how much gasoline was sold from that city's gasoline stations.
That's awesome. Janelle, I have a feeling you had a hand in that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It only took a year, but we got it done. Woo.
It's Beyond Gas initiative. They're really doing some great implementation stuff. That's why Menlo Park is really happy to be partnered with them.
Yay. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Any other clarifying questions about Climate Action Plan Strategy number 3?
I just had one question. Does the text on the left, does it mean implementation delegated to the Beyond Gas initiative? It says differed.
Yeah, I think it meant, sorry, it meant to be deferred. I apologize for the typo. Thanks for catching it. Great. Any other clarifying questions? So moving on to strategy number 3, that's expand access to electric vehicle charging for multifamily and commercial properties. So the staff completed the EV charging infrastructure gap analysis with a focus on multifamily in fall 2020, which Ms. Lucky referenced during my introduction, and that we found a deficiency for multifamily. So that's kind of the focus of a lot of the monitoring with commercial properties also in mind, obviously. So part of the implementation plan is to monitor local and regional incentives, especially the Peninsula Clean Energy EV Ready program, which includes not only their own funds for the expansion of level 1 charging, but also they're administrating the state funds for the Cal EVIP program, focusing on kind of larger projects that include both commercial and multifamily. So the good news is that PCI reports that 5 multifamily properties have applications that are currently under review. These properties vary in size from 4 to 41 units. So it's great to see kind of that spread, although 2 properties have yet to confirm the total units. The scope of the projects, because they're currently under review and part of the EV Ready program, is really customizing and maximizing charging at a specific location, are currently unknown because they are working specifically with the project managers and owners to really customize the project, again, to maximize charging. So that's currently unknown, but we are in contact with them and they are keeping us updated. Also, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, apologies to interrupt you. You may have mentioned this, but do we know where those multifamily properties, where the location is?
So the applications are still being reviewed, and I think there are, as customers, there are some privacy issues still there. I think once it's approved, then they might be willing to share more, but they just give us general information. And
thank you.
Another kind of way that we're assessing the success of this strategy, or that we kind of assess the success of the strategy, is because we had access to general permit data. We kind of went through and identified permits that listed specifically charging station installation and or electrical upgrades that were related to EV charging. So that is provided in the Climate Action Plan Progress Report in a lot more detail than kind of this overview, which I think gives you a good snapshot. Also, I did mention during the EV charging gap analysis that Bay Area Quality Management District, the charge program, they've changed to a competitive award. They were the information was kind of a little bit unavailable just because it is a competitive award, and they just closed applications in end of March, early April. So they're still really kind of evaluating. So I wasn't able to get any information about Menlo Park specifically. Just to kind of remind you that we're looking at expanded marketing and exploration of Menlo Park specific incentive program this fall under this strategy as well. And unfortunately, there are no climate action plan metrics that are currently related to the tracking of the progress of this specific strategy. Are there any clarification? Commissioner Cabot, sorry.
I had an activity level question on this. My recollection is that the council asked staff to continue engagement with multifamily property owners to encourage their participation in the EV charging incentives program. And have there been ongoing activities for outreach to those properties?
So and Ms. Lucky can correct me if I'm wrong, we were, the understanding of staff is that they were going to augment PCE's promotion of these projects, specifically PCE's EV Ready program. And then the expanded marketing program that I mentioned that we were going to explore this fall might be, you know, that the implementation of what you're describing and or, you know, augment and kind of stepping up of marketing just the installation in general, not necessarily related to a specific incentive program.
My was the direction from council to have two, I think it was two properties, actually kind of handhold two properties, getting EV chargers installed, and then reporting back to council on how that went. Is that happening?
So there's a couple of process items that need to be checked off before we can get to that point. So the council did authorize up to $10,000 in additional incentives on top of PCE's incentives that they offer for EV charging. And so we just need to nut out, you know, what that looks like. Is it per property or, you know, first come, first serve, and then working with PCE to leverage the staff that they have because they have greater access to the property owners. I mean, they've been reaching out and they've been getting applications. And so it's just really a coordinated effort with PCE. And we are going to have, you know, additional resource bandwidth in the fall. So we haven't started it, but it is planned for 2021 later in the fall.
Okay. And one other question for Candace. Candace, you said we don't have a metric related to action, this climate action strategy number 3. Is that what I heard you say?
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were asking to measure new EV chargers installed in the community. Are we not?
That is not one of the climate action plan metrics that I am aware of.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So moving on to strategy number 4. Strategy number 4 is reducing vehicle miles traveled, also known as VMT, by 25% or an amount recommended by the Complete Streets Commission. So this we actually reached out to both the Public Works Transportation team as well as the Community Development Planning team to really understand the projects, activities, and measures that they're currently working really hard at to accomplish that. So this is just kind of a summary of what they're working on. So I'll try to speak the best and most informatively as possible, and hopefully I'm very representative of their good works. So the transportation plan was adopted last fall. It includes 14 strategies that are either complete, underway, or planned. This does not include 6 multimodal capital improvement projects that were already underway or completed before the adoption of the climate action plan, nor does it include the 2 required infrastructure projects that 2 required infrastructure projects for a larger new development. So there's a lot of, you know, installation of new bike lanes, sidewalks, or installation or upgrade of bike lanes, sidewalks, and they have one strategy that is actually predicted to reduce transit time, which would be tremendous as well. The Transportation Management Association feasibility to achieve identified the following identified objectives is nearing completion and should be presented to City Council. They're hopeful kind of in the next couple of months. They say August, so I'm going to believe them. And then the objectives that were identified were just endorse and support the regional, sub-regional transportation demand management efforts. Specifically, Manzanita Works kind of came out that they're supporting. Ensure that transportation demand management is available for all businesses, big or small, you know, regardless of size. And also for the city to continue to serve as an example of an employer with a robust and really collaborative transportation demand management program. So the Senate Bill 2 housing grant activities are being considered part of the overall housing element update, which will, my understanding is it'll take the next year and a half to 2 years because it's the 2023 housing element update. But the focus of the Senate Bill 2 housing grant is to really accelerate and encourage the housing production in urban built up areas, kind of infill development, with a focus on reducing dependence on vehicles for everyday activities and thus reducing VMT. You know, some of the activities under the SB2 grants that are included are kind of streamlining the accessory dwelling unit process to make it more attractive to kind of, again, get that infill development. They're looking at zoning regulation amendments, specifically in the El Camino Real and downtown specific plan, and expediting the processing, this permit processing process. That's wrong. Expediting the permit process. There it is. Sorry, too many P's. Including instituting programs and tools to improve documentation and accessibility or consolidate the review and process of accessory dwelling units. So the related metric to this would be vehicle miles traveled within, inbound, and outbound in Menlo Park. And we're using the Google EIE, Environmental Insight Explorer, which gives us kind of the most real count, even though it's anonymized and not everybody uses Google Maps, but a lot of people use Google Maps. So it gives us kind of the most representative idea of how many vehicles are traveling within the city at any given time or annually. And again, for kind of more specific data, please refer to the progress report. Are there any clarifying questions or?
Yes, I have one.
Comments?
Yes, please.
Commissioner,
You said VMT is from people who are driving and they have Google Maps on, or is Google Maps tracking their progress regardless of whether they are like navigating?
So excellent question. And I'm not 100% clear on that, but per the adopted 2030 climate action plan, the VMT metric was reported using the EIE data, which is sourced from the Google Map app. And it's, to your point, I'm not 100% sure that they can guarantee that it's for people who are driving. It could be, because it does capture not only vehicle miles traveled, but also those that are using public transportation, because it's multimodal, sorry. So it not only tracks vehicle miles traveled, but it also tracks public transportation, walking, and bike miles. So
okay, it'd just be interesting to
clarify.
follow and find out, is that only when people are using Google Maps to navigate? Because, you know, once you know your way around, you probably are not going to use Google Maps to try to get somewhere that you've been, you know, 1,000 times.
Janelle, I actually spoke to the folks at Google who created this thing, and it's been a while. It's been like 2 years, I think. My recollection is that I think that your phone, like, they actually can track this information. Yeah, even when Google, you're not actually using Google Maps. I think it's like a setting usually on your phone, but a lot of people just allow it to be tracked all the time because you get other benefits from that.
Right.
And the other is that they do aggregate out, you know, the other modes of travel, and they can do that by using algorithms showing how fast the phone is traveling. So, but I do think that all gets totaled up into one big number. I think it's possible to go into the tool.
It's broken out discreetly. It's broken out discreetly by mode. But yeah, they do a multimodal assessment of the vehicles that are being, or of the miles that are being traveled in Menlo Park.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Evans? You're on mute.
My second time. I was also wondering if the Google EIE, my understanding of it is that it just aggregates at the city level, because I was looking at it because I was wondering if you, Candace, or others have been able to get it broken down into different parts of the city as it relates to emissions, or no, they don't make that data available. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's all proprietary. So they're willing to share it at the they're more than willing to share it after it's been synthesized, but we don't get access to any of the raw data.
Okay, thank you.
Any other clarifying questions or comments? Great. So moving on to climate action plan strategy number 5, that's the elimination of the use of fossil fuels from municipal operations. Again, a lot of different projects and moving parts are related to the implementation of this strategy. So I'm just kind of going to give you an overview of what we're working on. So the proposals for the Menlo Park Community Campus microgrid, the Menlo Park Community Campus is going to be built in Belhaven on the existing site of the Onetta Harris Community Center, the Belhaven Pool, the Belhaven Library, and the Senior Center. So they're going to remove and replace 4 existing buildings with a larger community campus. And to showcase the sustainability leadership, they are working towards not only all electric construction, but a microgrid, because it is going to be a Red Cross emergency center, so that it can operate completely using a combination of solar and battery storage. So the feasibility study for that project was approved by the City Council. The City Council authorized the request for proposals. The proposals have been submitted and they're currently under review. Staff expects to have an award of contract in the next few months, kind of September. Sorry, I don't know why I forgot what month comes after August. I apologize. Is when they're looking to have that public meeting. So the city manages a municipal fleet, which includes 109 vehicles. The municipal fleet has transitioned to renewable diesel away from fossil fuel diesel. Renewable diesel is made from things like cooking oil versus, drilling into the ground and getting, like I said, crude oil to make diesel. They've also reserved 5 full battery electric Ford F-150s that are slated to go into production in 2022. The city is also planning HVAC replacements at the Arriaga Family Recreation Center and Gymnasium, and they're planned to be all electric. The city has performed an electrical capacity study at City Hall. That's basically where we kind of go in and see how much electricity we actually have, so that we can install some more electric vehicle charging stations at City Hall, which is where most of the currently 109 fleet vehicles are stored, so that they can transition more readily to electric because they will have a place to charge. So the assessment has been completed and they're currently in the design phase. The city is also currently piloting the use of 4 new full battery electric leaf blowers for the maintenance of all 14 of its parks, and then the facilities, including the civic campus and the soon to be constructed Menlo Park Community Campus. And the related metric for this one would be number 7, which is the percentage of municipal assets converted from gasoline diesel to electric. We don't currently have a specific discrete percentage because there needs to be a full audit of all of the assets, and staff kind of, to set a bar, is defining assets right now as something that's $5,000 or more at point of purchase. But the good news is there's a public works consultant that has been brought on to assist with this long-term strategy to convert all of the municipal assets, and also kind of help manage the greenhouse gas emissions related to operations. So hopefully we'll have even more good news than has been listed here soon. Is there any clarifying questions or comments? I see 2 hands, Commissioner Elkins and Commissioner Evans. So,
can I go?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about these F-150s. Are those going to replace existing
Yes.
trucks? Okay, they're not.
They would not be in addition to the fleet. They would be replacements.
And regarding the electrification of the Arriaga Family Rec Center and the gym, is that going to happen immediately or upon burnout of the existing system?
So they're looking at replacements now, and the installations, I believe they're aiming for 2022. So it's
They will replace systems that are still operating.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Evans?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I was just going to call out, thank you for this. This is all great. The last bullet on the new leaf blower electric. Yeah. And I know you have a public works consultant coming on, and I just wondered the extent to it. So this was just conceptually reminiscent of work I did with the city just as a private citizen. I wasn't on the commission, but it was back in 2019, I think, when the city realized that synthetic toxic pesticides were still being used on the playing fields. And I helped connect the city of Palo Alto at that time to the city of Menlo Park, because Palo Alto hadn't been spraying their fields for some time. And the big takeaway was it doesn't necessarily need to create more work if we increase our tolerance threshold for weeds. And the idea there was, can we educate the public about why the fields aren't going to look as pristine or perfectly green as they did before, while making sure that some of the weeds are reasonably managed, but that there's a balance, and that the net benefit is for an increase in public health for those who are playing on the fields. And I wondered if a similar concept could be applied for the leaf blowing in public parks. I know there's mention, I think, on page 23 of the climate action report about how it increases time and work, which makes sense. However, if there's a way we can educate the public about why perhaps we're going to blow the leaves less often, there might be some accumulation that's within reason, more so than we've seen in the past. But the reason is that we're trying to control emissions and use these electric blowers. And I just wonder if that could help reduce the workload for the maintenance staffs with respect to that. Thanks.
Well, and I'll of course defer to Ms. Lucky. I've made this notation because it does raise an interesting point, but I would like to flag, and I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the concerns for the Public Works maintenance team is public safety. And if you do have a large accumulation of leaves, you can't necessarily see any branches, tripping hazards, or something that could be potentially sharp or dangerous. So
makes total sense.
I think that's something that I could feel the staff behind me saying it's all about public safety. It's all about you have to make sure that people don't trip or hurt themselves. So I think that would be a main takeaway from that. But again, you do flag an interesting point, and I've definitely made a notation to that.
It just was conceptually similar. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I was just going to agree with you.
No, I think it makes sense. And I don't want to go too deep into this because there's so much to do. But at the time with the fields, that was also an issue, because if a field is riddled with weeds, that's not as safe for the people who are playing soccer or running around on the fields. But again, they were able to come to a sort of a different balance, certainly not the field covered entirely by weeds, because that would be completely unreasonable, but a slight increase that allowed them to decrease their workload and then therefore eliminate the use of the pesticides without increasing the maintenance budget. So I don't know if there's wiggle room there with the leaves, which is a slightly different issue, but it was conceptually similar. So I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, and again, you made a super interesting point, and I don't know if you saw me writing it down, but I definitely made a notation, and I'm happy to bring it back to the Public Works staff.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions or comments? Wonderful. So moving on to strategy number 6. Oh, I apologize. I already had moved on to strategy number 6. I'm moving ahead of myself. So develop a climate action adaptation plan to protect the community from sea level rise and flooding. There's 3 kind of really big projects that Public Works is working on simultaneously. The strategy to advance flood protection, ecosystem, and recreation along the San Francisco Bay project, also referred to as Safer Bay. The city has submitted a grant application, And the good news is that it has been selected for further review. That means that while it's not a dedication of funds, $50 million has been set aside for Menlo Park, which is a significant step forward in the process. And this grant money would go towards the regional project with the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority to protect people, property, and infrastructure from the bay tides and the anticipated sea level rise. Menlo Park has also partnered with One Shoreline for the construction and maintenance of the Bayfront Canal and Atherton Channel Flood Project, which is in response to the high tides that have kept flows from the canal to drain into the bay, resulting in significant flooding in the area 40 times over the last 70 years, the most recent in 2017. So that's another pretty big one. The city is also in the process of updating its local hazard mitigation plan. And all local hazard mitigation plans, or LHMPs, reduce risk to life and property from hazardous events, including those compounded or caused by climate change, like the high tides resulting in increased flooding along the Bayfront Canal and Atherton Channel area. There are no climate action plan metrics related to this that I know of. Are there any kind of clarifying questions, or did you have more questions about any of these specific projects? Great. So with that, I will turn the next steps over to Ms. Lucky so that she can kind of walk you through what you'll be doing next.
Thank you. So thanks, Candace, for giving us the overview. And I think what we're looking at as far as CAP's Climate Action Plan strategies 1 through 6 is looking at what the scope of work the City Council identified earlier this year and just providing an update on that. And of course, and so I think we're trying to look at for beyond 2021 is taking this report to the City Council on August 31st and including the EQC's recommendations for beyond 2021 for discussion. And for the next EQC meeting, we're looking to bring forward some proposals on the metrics. So there was definitely some great metrics that were easy to access. There was even additional opportunities we realized to help further track some of the CAP items 1 through 6 that maybe don't have a specific metric or just maybe need a tweak. And so we'll bring those forward to the EQC next month for further discussion. So that concludes my next steps. I'm going to return the meeting back to you, Commissioner Chair.
So sorry, Rebecca, are we having discussion about this, or?
We have to take public comment first.
Okay.
So that was all introducing the item. So now we are ready for public comment on this item. Ms. Lucky, do we have any public comment on this item at this time?
So if any members of the public who are in attendance would like to provide public comment on this item, which is the Climate Action Plan Progress Report, you can do so by raising your hand. It is the feature next to your name. If you're on a landline, you could press the *9 feature and I'll be able to also unmute your microphone. And with that, I see one hand raised. Mr. Peter Edmonds. I've unmuted you, so you should be able to unmute your microphone and speak. Thank you.
I'd like to raise a question about one of the first slides that were shown, where there was a graph line which was at the top of the slide relating to the increased use of fossil fuel gas by commercial buildings, where this increase was attributed rather offhand way to expansion of the commercial sector. Can you go back to that slide? So I think the first or second slide, which had these breaking down.
Candace or Rebecca, I think Mr. Edmonds is referring to the very first or second slide that showed, and he's hoping to see that slide to give his comment. If we can.
Yes, I'm trying to pull it up at this moment.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, the question I want to pose is, have you tried to break the data down to derive another metric such as the gross usage of this fuel per employee?
I'm sorry, Mr. Edmonds, I'm having some difficulty hearing you. Could you please repeat your inquiry?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have my microphone close. Is this better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
I'm wondering if you have tried to break down the data to derive a different metric from simply the gross consumption of fuel in these commercial buildings to, say, the consumption per employee, which would give you a way of adjusting for the increase in commercial activity. There may be other metrics that would show that you despite the increase in gross commercial activity, there has possibly been a decrease in the fuel used per employee, for example, and show that by that measure there had been progress in reduction of use and the more and greater efficiency. You follow my question?
Yes, Mr. Edmonds. The data has not been synthesized to that level, but I've made that notation. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonds. Are there other public comments, Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair Price. I do believe we have further public comment. I have Miss Erin Cook. I have unmuted your microphone and you should be able to speak. Thank you.
Ms. Cook, I believe you are still on, you are still muted yourself. There you go. I think you're unmuted now.
Okay, great. Just confirming you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm really just here to speak in support of all of the incredible labor, strategic planning, and intentionality behind staff in the Environmental Quality Commission's focus on climate action planning. As a resident of Menlo Park and someone who works in the sustainability field, I'm just incredibly motivated every day about the work that our city has done, and want to mostly just acknowledge my support and certainly many community members' support for your incredible leadership, particularly as it relates to climate action planning, setting really advanced greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, and then having just an incredibly thorough, focused strategy of how to really, roadmap and inch our city in terms of its municipal buildings, our residential sector, and our commercial sector towards achieving what we really need to do to mitigate climate change in these really crucial 2 to 3 years until we see increased events as we are already in California and the Pacific Northwest. I also just really want to emphasize the importance of us continuing to focus on REACH codes and eliminating fossil fuel devices, not only for the reasons mentioned in the staff report, but because of the human health impacts of methane and CO that arises from leaking devices. I do want to make sure we acknowledge those in future staff reports, Human health obviously being a major driver for decarbonization alongside the greenhouse gas emissions benefit. So looking forward to really amplifying that when we do community outreach. And certainly, want to acknowledge and certainly access opportunities you feel are important to engage the community and really driving the decarbonization strategies across all sectors. I'm happy to share my home as an electric home, or take people on tours of the airport where we have a lot of all electric buildings that I'm happy to share and showcase. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Lucky, do we have additional public comment?
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. So if there are no additional public comments, and we always appreciate the public comments, then we'll return the conversation and open up for discussion amongst the EQC members. So Josie, I don't know if based on your comment, if you had something that you wanted to contribute to start the discussion, or if you were just asking, but now's the time.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe this is coming, but next time, I guess the question, I have lots of questions, but maybe we can save some of them. Very high level. I spoke to a staff person at another city just about Excella, because I know that was an issue for tracking. It looks like we didn't track last year how many heat pump water heaters and heat pump space heaters, which we're very focused on, how many were installed. Looks like that was not added to the permit process, like a checkbox. So we weren't able to see that data. And speaking to a staff person at another city, they said that making a change like that is fairly easy. So I wanted to ask staff, is that your impression too? I mean, was it something that we just didn't get around to? But once we decide to do it, it won't be too hard.
Thank you, Commissioner Gellard. So I think this is probably a perfect discussion to have when we bring back what metrics might be streamlined with the CAP action items. We've transitioned to Excella. We have been working through a lot of issues getting through to our online permitting system. And so I think there's other impacts, and happy to discuss those before the next meeting and to kind of go through that. But there could be other metrics that we could use to, again, track whether or not we're seeing the decrease in natural gas usage in buildings.
Yeah, I just want to say and I think I know members of council are interested in this too, like tracking how many. I know when I filled out a permit, I was asked a lot of questions like this, and it would have been very, it would have been very intuitive, I think, as a person applying for a permit, to just have another checkbox, like, is this a heat pump water heater, and are you replacing a current gas device? So I just want to reiterate that I would not want to set that aside. I think we absolutely need that at least for heat pump water heaters and space heaters. So I think we need to find a way to do that. And again, it's my understanding that that's not a very difficult thing to do working with Excella.
Okay, I've noted it. And again, I think it would be good to have the discussion next month as we kind of near that. And I'll touch base with the building department too on that. They are aware of what the climate action plan would like to track, and just aligning that with the priorities of the implementation of Excella.
If a council member voted to make that a priority, would that help it to elevate it?
So I think this again is more discussion and more just analysis of what we're trying to measure and what's the best metric tool to measure that. So I think there's just differing ways to get there, and it's just trying to find the best path forward on it. And what would be most efficient as well.
Commissioner Cabot.
Still building on that conversation. If we have discussion at the August EQC meeting, and commissioners have suggestions, Is there time to be implementations before staff is reporting to council at the end of August?
Yes. Yes.
So just to
And I
summarize
would
that,
just, yeah,
oh,
and I
go
would just
ahead.
caveat too, I mean, there's trade-offs as well. I mean, if there, you know, the ability to implement that in Incella does take resources and staff time, even to get to that point. And, you know, to be kind of frank too, when we were looking at the permit data for the next item, you know, it did take some staff time and resources, and luckily we had extra resources to do that. Now, whether that's going to be available on an ongoing basis, I think that's still, we're still navigating that. There are additional resources being allocated to the building division, so there could be opportunities.
Commissioner Elkins.
So yeah, I also wanted to talk about this because it seemed to me that there was quite a few things that we just couldn't see based on the metrics that were being used, and it does sound like possibly this particular issue is relatively easily solved by tweaking the software. But is there, does staff have suggestions of other metrics? Because it seems that all the DMV data was hard to find. The other building permit data was not there or took so much staff. Are there other metrics that you have in your mind that we should be suggesting? And are you going to give those to us next month, or?
Yeah, I think we're still working. Yeah, we're still working through them. So I think after reading the report, the finalized report, you know, and you know, looking at it holistically, Candace and I really identified there's probably ways to really streamline it to make sure that the metrics are connected to the 6 CAP strategies, and you know, checking in with the other departments who have to supply us the information. I think we need to build on some criteria as to how we select which sources and how, you know, consistent can we get that data if there's staff changes or other things that happen. And so again, there's a lot of value in the metrics that have been provided. It's just kind of vetting them a little bit more to ensure that we're using our resources efficiently, and that the information is publicly available as well. So there's no disputes as to, you know, what might be reported.
Are these metrics that the EQC set up to give to you?
Yeah, so these were approved as part of the climate action plan. So they
Right.
were, you know, developed. I mean, staff did support, you know, at the time, you know, when the metrics were proposed, and, you know, I think we did identify some challenges with it, but still, you know, tried to accommodate and kind of see if there was a pathway forward. And so I'd say that this is probably like the first, again, and in the report it says it's the first year that we're using these metrics. Right. And so I think there's a kind of piloting and just a trial of, you know, is this right. the best one, or is this the best fit, or could we tweak it a little bit, or could we find, you know, another way to report this that's consistent too throughout the report.
So it seemed like it might work, but then in actually getting down to it,
well, there's quite a few of them that do work. Like I would say the right. majority of them do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Cabot.
At one point, Candace, you mentioned at the next meeting bringing forward 6, or I forget if it was 6, but recommendations of actions to be taken in 2021. And are those related to the 6 actions that the EQC climate action plan subcommittee had proposed a couple of months ago?
Yeah, so that would go along with the CAP progress report that the EQC has provided recommendations for actions beyond 2021. So it's the EQC recommendations.
Okay, so it sounds like that'll be in time to help line things up for council consideration in their winter budget or winter priority setting sessions. Is that? does that meet that time schedule?
Yes, yes. And you know, to be fair too, we need to also speak with other departments and kind of understand and if, you know, what capacity might be needed or the bandwidth. So that provides a good amount of time to have those discussions and vet through them. And to identify any other potential measures that could help us achieve carbon neutrality by 2030.
All right, thank you.
So one other thing on the metrics, I don't know if it was an oversight on our part or we were just trying to stick with 9, not go to too many metrics, but I think that we should be tracking number of EV chargers installed. And it sounds like maybe that was going to be part of something you recommended. I would like to see that tracked. In fact, when I filled out a permit, that was one of the specific questions that was asked. It was, is this a solar system? Is this an EV charger? So I know that Acela is checking that on every permit. So I think it would be good to break it out by commercial, residential, retail, and within residential, actually single family or multifamily if possible, so that we can get some insight into, because we're especially focused on multifamily, right? Like who, how many chargers are going in, and if there's some way in the checkbox to figure out these new ALMS systems are going in where one charging port can be plugged into 5 cars and then the power gets like metered out over the 5 cars. So it'd be really good to, in Acela, to get a question in addition to, is this an EV charger, is how many ports does this provide, you know, especially for the multifamily.
Yeah, I think we do provide in the report, Candace can correct me, but we do have it broken down by multifamily, commercial. I think there's other ways, again, at getting that at the data without necessarily having to, you know, scour our building permit system. Charge point, a lot of these companies already have kind of where they're located. I don't know, Candace can maybe answer like whether it includes like private, like charging station versus public, if it's all encompassing. So there's definitely ways to get that information, and we have started to track it in this report.
On page 11 of the report, there is a breakdown by multifamily and commercial properties, just because that was related specifically to strategy number 3, which was focused on multifamily and commercial properties and did not include single family properties. So we do have the general permit data that we kind of went through that had identified the installation of charging stations. And charging station definition has, you know, kind of evolved and changed, and how we track it. Like, I don't think it was particularly wonderful at tracking level 1 charging. And I will say, in terms of like optimization of Acela, software as a service absolutely is customizable to any level that you'd like at a price. So that's a consideration for sure. The more customizations, the more the kind of radio boxes and things that we need, that number starts ticking up. So that's just a consideration in terms of prioritization for the building division to be able to get its work done.
I think if that was, I appreciate that. I think if that was presented to council, I'm pretty certain that I know they want visibility into this number, and
absolutely. I felt like I would be remiss without mentioning that, you know, we can, where's the service, they want to do whatever you want.
Yeah, and to that point, like, I think there should be no scouring of data. Like, this needs to be worked into. I understand it's taken kind of a year to kind of get around to it, but I really feel very strongly this needs to be put into the systems so that it's just a report that's pulled up, that it's not someone going permit by permit trying to figure out what was done. We need to set up the systems right in order to track this, because it should not be a time-intensive exercise.
Commissioner Cabot?
Yes, thank you for raising that fact that software as a service charges for additional information it provides. And so when you supply the options, can you also tell us the price for getting the additional data? Because, you know, the information has a value, and if it's within the realm, it's paying the price. So we want to make informed advice to council.
So what's going to be brought forward to the Environmental Quality Commission next month is talking to the other departments, particularly the building division, to understand what it would take. I think, again, what we're trying to aim for is what will this data show as far as local efforts at the end of the day? And if there's something different that we're looking at, then I think that's a different conversation. And so there are different ways of achieving that. And I think that's probably the larger philosophy or discussion that we need to work backwards from, rather than trying to obtain data that may or may not show progress. Because when Candace had shown the graphs as far as commercial natural gas usage, I mean, what we want to see is a downward trend. So if we institute any kind of policy and we don't see a downward trend, well, that's a signal that there's something amiss or we need to work somewhere else.
But sorry to interrupt, but to Mr. Edmonds' point, it can, there can be other noise in the data, which is why tracking at this per unit level is really important.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I mean, at least for the energy data, and I know we've had talks about the inventory and sometimes it's not as accurate because it's measuring a lot of variables, but for building energy use, it is accurate. I mean, we're looking at the exact therms that the commercial sector is using. We're looking at the exact therms that the residential, there's no, I mean, if I were to say like what's most accurate in the inventory, like that's the one area that is the most accurate is the building energy use. So I think those are things to account for and have further discussion on. And again, I think starting from the point of establishing some criteria, like how easy is it to get this data? How much resources does it take? Can we upgrade the system? How much time, how much resources would that take? Or is there another metric that we can use that can measure that progress still and understand whether some of our local policies or programs are making a difference?
Commissioner Cabot, oh, sorry, Commissioner Gaylord. Commissioner Cabot, you had, oh, and Commissioner Evans also has her hand raised. You raised your physical hand,
yep.
but I don't know if it's still raised.
Well, I just wanted to build on the point that we were going over, that what Mr. Edmonds raised, the idea of being able to show the therms per employee was his example. It might show you that your efforts are working, but meanwhile, employment is going up faster than your efforts are working. And so then you would be able to say, we don't indict the efforts, we don't stop them because they're not working, they are working. We just are fighting a growing workforce of employees, et cetera. So anyway, it's a way to figure out what's working and what's not. But ultimately, I do agree, we have to get the total to zero, or we cannot start getting carbon out of the atmosphere.
Commissioner Evans and then Commissioner London.
Thank you. I was just going to say, as it relates to sourcing data, it's come up in a different context, which is, and I'll talk about this later, but I know that companies that, or organizations that cities can sort of outsource electrification work to. So one example would be Block Power. My understanding is that when they start looking at areas within cities or cities to electrify, they do tend to ask up front for permitting data by region. And so, yeah, I mean, again, I think the extent to which, if it's not too expensive to add some of those pieces, I think having ready access to that data could be really helpful if and when the city ever decides to do some type of an RFP to try to figure out, who could help us with our electrification work down the road.
Sorry, I said thank you, and then Commissioner London, and then Commissioner Gaylord.
Sorry, are you calling on me now? Okay, yeah, I kind of had the same point as Tom did, just that, yes, we want to be able to see as much data as we can, and ultimately that's not an excuse to congratulate ourselves. Like, even if we cut per capita use in half, the climate does not care, so we have to do even more. So anyway, basically the same point Tom was making. which Tom made very eloquently. And I'm sorry, but I have to leave. So thank you guys.
Okay, thanks, Janelle. Commissioner Gaylor.
Yeah, I was just, obviously I'm trying to make the point strongly that I think we need to track at the unit level for these. And I was thinking, like, why is this so important? Here's an example. I actually think we need to be tracking how many people replace a gas furnace with another gas furnace. And here's why. Because everyone that goes in now is going to be in operation potentially for 30 years. I think we want to know how many of those are going in now, because we're going to have to like do something with those, right? We're going to have to, there's sort of a liability actually in terms of our climate plans. So I think it's important for us to know, in 2021, we had, I would estimate probably 300 gas furnaces that went in that will still be functional in 2051, when the state's supposed to be climate neutral. So I think we need to have that insight to understand kind of at the fleet level, how many, and we wouldn't get that from just looking at aggregate gas data. I mean, the aggregate gas data is important, but I think we need to understand how many of the sort of the bad devices are going in at that level. And the other thing is, it's interesting. I hear staff saying, well, maybe we would look to another agency, to get this data about our own city. And I feel like Menlo Park, like, we should be able to access data that's generated within the city. Like the fact that, this idea that maybe the data that we are collecting as a city is not accessible to us and to the public seems a little, it just seems surprising that like the easier path would be to get it from somebody else than the city.
So I'm not, could you clarify, are you talking about the EV charging data that we could get from ChargePoint or EVgo? Because that's what I was referring to, I
heard you talking about maybe looking to partners to get data like outside of the city, as opposed to like trying to get it from our own IT systems.
Yeah, so that's not what I intended to say, because we do get a lot of data from external sources like the CEC or PCE. So we very much do get a lot of our, I would say, good data from other agencies that publish and have access to it. But for the building permit data, I wasn't suggesting that we could get it from some other company.
Thank you. So this is obviously a meaty topic. And one of the questions I think that we have as we are looking at the discussion is where we would like to go from here. And it may be, I think there are a lot of questions and there's a lot of information in the report. So one thought I had was, is there a possibility that we aren't necessarily in a position to have all the information ready today, but instead we would ask, for example, the CAP subcommittee to potentially look at this information, look at this this report from staff and come to the August meeting with recommendations that we would be able to include in what goes forward to City Council at the end of August. Obviously, we would need Rebecca and the staff to say that that is possible in terms of a timeline, but it strikes me that there are, at this point, many more questions potentially than we have answers, and I thought that could potentially help us get farther into the conversation than we may be able to do tonight alone. So I'm going to toss that idea out there.
I think it's a good idea.
I would support sending that to the subcommittee and seeing if the subcommittee is able to come back with recommendations or observations or, about it, and to improve our discussion with the staff. I myself have not been able to go through the full report. I was out of town over the weekend when it arrived.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Rebecca, I threw that out there. Is that something that is possible?
If the subcommittee would like to review the report in more depth and provide some advice to the EQC as a whole, I think that's doable. As far as staff bandwidth, until the next meeting, I think we might want to reserve some of that bandwidth for the subcommittee for the next item.
Okay.
So, I mean, there is a potential, but I just want to have that caveat out there because we've got some meaty things that we're trying to deliver to the city council in the next couple of months.
Yep. So how would we like to steer this conversation now in terms of where we go from here toward the August meeting? One possibility is that we are essentially towards our goal, which the next steps, as Rebecca outlined, is for this information to go to city council. So how would we like to move forward from here, knowing that we have an August meeting that's occurring prior to the city council meeting on this topic? And the only reason I mention that again is because it means we don't have to have everything sorted tonight.
Yeah, one suggestion would be to have the EQC subcommittee look at it. I think it would be to Rebecca's point, the CAP subcommittee is also really busy too. So I think our recommendations would be very brief. This wouldn't be like a multi-page report even necessarily. I think it would just be like a one-page bullet of, here's some check boxes we think that the building, probably the building department should add to Acela, and a few other, adding the EV charging to the official CAP metrics. So I think it would be very short. So I don't think it would take a lot of staff time, and it would just be a recommendation from the subcommittee to the EQC. So I know CAP staff usually reviews those, but I don't know if that's out of their ability, their desire to be helpful, or if that's necessarily a must do. I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe you might want to think about, so when the agenda is released, I mean, you'll have kind of some of the proposals already there, and then that might be more productive. You might have not very much time, but then it might give you the bandwidth for the other items, and then to look at this before the next meeting, between the agenda being released and the meeting.
So I guess I didn't totally follow that. I would recommend that we have the subcommittee look at this between now and the next meeting, and come to the meeting with a short, recommendation, and we'll see how it syncs up with staff's.
And Rebecca, could you clarify the timeline? Oh, cough. Could you clarify the timeline for what, when you were talking about the CAP subcommittee and the timeline of releasing the agenda, because the agenda is usually released the week prior, at least to the meeting?
Yes, yeah, and it'll probably be released the Thursday before that meeting, because a lot of the topics we're discussing tonight will probably carry over to the next meeting. So yeah, there'll be some time, like 5 days or so, to review kind of what staff is thinking about, and then for the subcommittee to kind of see that and
so if there's
evaluate.
any new if there's any new information on top of what we talk about tonight that's released to the Thursday before the meeting, that should still give the CAP subcommittee some additional time to put something together prior to the meeting on August. Does that make sense, Josie? So I wasn't clear on the timeline either.
You had me until you said August.
So I think, so this is my understanding, is the, let me see if the calendar I can look at. So our August meeting would be on the 18th. So on August 18th, the Thursday before would be the 12th. So what I hear Rebecca saying is that the agenda and any additional information from staff would be released by the 12th of August. And that means that you guys can be prepared with everything you know today. What I hear Rebecca saying is, just in case there's other information that's shared on the 12th, you still would have potentially that window of time to review and change your recommendation to any degree that you would want to with the new information before we met on the 18th.
Got it. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I got it.
No, it's okay. I find this stuff very confusing. So that's why I've
because usually when
when
the subcommittee usually, if we're like the agenda item, then we have to submit the memo by the 12th or roughly by the 10th. And so you're saying we have a little bit of extra time because you guys are going to be presenting the main agenda item and we're sort of supplemental. Is that what I'm hearing? Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Josie put forward an informal motion. Did you want to formalize that motion?
Yeah, I'll formalize the motion that the EQC, this be referred to the EQC subcommittee, who will return at the next meeting with a brief proposal.
And is there a second?
I'll second it. And just to also mention, it's the EQC's Climate Action Plan Subcommittee.
Correct. Oh, thank you, Tom. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And Rebecca, would you like to call for a vote on the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Elkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Price,
Aye.
Commissioner Cabot,
Aye.
Commissioner Evans,
Aye.
Commissioner Gillard,
Aye.
Commissioner Payne.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I know that we have, I did want to call for a small recess. Maybe we can take 15 minutes as a recess, just to make sure everybody gets to eat and things like that. And welcome Commissioner Payne to the meeting. It's good to see you. So we can take a quick recess now, and when we return, we'll actually reverse course and be on item D2, unless it's preferred, Rebecca, for the presenters to move ahead to D4 and then return to D2 after D4.
I think it's up to the commission.
Okay, so if it's okay, I think we could finish our conversation about D2, which we held off on, James, so that you could join the conversation because it's the item on the chair and vice chair election, and then we'll move forward to D4. But let's take a 15-minute recess and be back. Of course, it's an odd time, so be back at, say, 7:55. It's like 13 minutes.
Can I
Go
just
ahead.
give James the heads up that the reason we deferred is because we remembered that last year you kind of stepped out, but we're maybe planning to be the chair. And so we wanted to hear your thoughts about that. Just wanted you to have a heads up. Yeah.
Thank you for the summary.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to go on a brief recess until 7:55. And so you can if you're on the commission, you can turn your camera off during that time, and then we'll just all be back on at 7:55.
Thanks.
I know we don't quite have everybody back yet, but there's James. But Rebecca, are we ready to resume the meeting at 7:57 now? Okay, we have everybody back. Okay, we are ready to start the meeting again. So the meeting of the EQC is back in session starting at 7:58. And we're returning to item D2, which is the election of the chair and the vice chair. And in summary, where we had left off, we had taken public comment and we had begun the discussion. And then due to the nature of the discussion, we decided to table the agenda item until we knew Commissioner Payne, because he was joining a little bit late, was in the meeting because his point of view is pertinent to the discussion, as he had indicated previously that he, when after he served as a vice chair 2 years ago, that he would potentially return to commission leadership in the future. And so we wanted to include him in the discussion. So that was where we left off. James, we were seeking your thoughts. So not to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna.
Yeah. First of all, hi everyone. Sorry for my my late arrival tonight, and nice to meet you, Angela. I'm sorry I missed your introduction at the beginning. So yeah, and I don't know what the discussion was like before you decided to table it until now, but I'm happy to serve as the commission chair if the commission thinks that that's the, that I'm the best person for the role at this time. But if there is someone else who's interested in the position and thinks their schedule will be a little bit more stable, I am still subject to the occasional baby-caused curveball, as evidenced by tonight, as well as the fact that I'm going to be starting a new job next month. So there's a little potential variability there. So, so yeah, all that to say, my schedule might still be somewhat variable, and I might have to lean a bit more than average on the vice chair. So if there's someone else who thinks that they would be a more stable leader for the commission, I'm happy to defer to them. Otherwise, again, if people think that I would be the best fit, I'm happy to take that role on as well.
Thank you, James. Commissioner Cabot.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Payne for chair.
Oh, sorry.
I would second that. So we have a first and a second. Rebecca, can we have a vote on the EQC chair for the next year, and then we'll return to discussion for the vice chair?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. I was not muted. My daughter was showing me something.
That's okay. That's
but yes,
very
yay.
nice.
Commissioner Payne. So I'm sorry. The motion was
to have Commissioner Payne was put forward by Commissioner Cabot and seconded by myself.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to elect Commissioner Payne as the chair of the Environmental Quality Commission. And it was motioned by Commissioner Cabot, and seconded by Commissioner Price. I will take roll call vote. Commissioner Elkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Evans?
Aye.
Commissioner Gillard?
Aye.
Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Commissioner Payne?
Aye.
And Commissioner Cabot?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we can return to the discussion of the vice chair role. So James, just to bring you up to speed on the vice chair conversation, Janelle did say that she was willing to serve, and she also acknowledged that she has served this past year and previously, and she also opened her kind of departing comment on the topic was that even somebody who's just brand new, like Commissioner Evans, can feel confident to jump into a vice chair role. And so that was kind of the previous conversation prior to revisiting it now. So that all of that said, does somebody have thoughts on the vice chair role?
If Angela is willing to do it, I would nominate Angela.
I second that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think what James, what I said is I'm hoping to work really hard and commit a lot of my time to building electrification, if I can, if the EQC votes for my ability to potentially join the relevant subcommittee there. But it sounds like there's a need, and you need someone to fill it. So I will happily do that. Yes, if that's what you guys want.
Excellent. So we have a motion for Ms. Commissioner Evans to serve as the vice chair. That was put forward by Commissioner Gaylord and seconded by Commissioner Cabot. Should we take a roll call vote on that as well?
Yes. Commissioner Elkins?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Evans?
Aye.
Commissioner Gillard?
Aye.
Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Commissioner Payne?
Aye.
And Commissioner Cabot?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
And I just want to say to Ryan, thank you so much for serving for, I think it was 3 years. This is like a serious, fulfilling of your duty and more. So thank you.
Thank you. I
Thank
feel,
you.
thank you. I'm very excited for the new team, and if I can be helpful, let me know. But I think we have such a fabulous committee, and I just really appreciate the work everybody puts in. So I would say the same back to you, Josie. Thank you for everything. So with that, we can conclude item D2 and return to item D4 on the agenda. Item D4 is reviewing and discussing the cost effectiveness and policy options report to electrify existing buildings. And I will turn it over to Sustainability Manager Rebecca Lucky to introduce the item.
Thank you, Commissioner Chair. It's my pleasure to introduce this item. I know it's a long-awaited milestone for Climate Action Plan goal number 1, which is to electrify 95% of Menlo Park's existing buildings to all electric by 2030. And so we've assembled a team back in January to really begin working on this project. And start to develop the cost effectiveness analysis to electrify all buildings in Menlo Park. And that's been primarily led by TRC. So I've got Farhamad here to present on the cost effectiveness analysis. And he's also been working closely with the state's investor-owned utilities, who also produce a lot of data and analysis about building prototypes and conditioning the data for Menlo Park specific environment. And I also have Blake Hershaft on as well, and he works for DNV. He's also been just very generous with his time to assist in helping us with the cost effectiveness analysis and policy pathways, and looking at greenhouse gas reductions as a result of some of the potential policy pathways. And then we also have Myra Vega from TRC, and she's been very much supporting, just looking at in depth about our policy options and just looking at it through different lenses and how they might, fall together or fit. And then we also have Ron Lafrance, who had worked for the city for about 20 some years, 20 plus, and retired, and we brought him back on as a retired attenuant. He's the assistant public works, I mean, not public works, maybe I'm giving you more titles, Ron, assistant community development director. And so he's really dedicated, all of his time to work on kind of what might work from a permit desk standpoint, and just looking at the pros and cons and what the city can think about moving forward. And so I do have also an introduction. I think Farhad's going to start our slideshow here soon. But that's the introductions. And just also to mention, we've got Peninsula Clean Energy here, Representative Rafael Reyes. He's in the attendees. Again, PCE has been also very generous in just allowing us to piggyback on their resources in order to analyze the cost effectiveness analysis and help us understand incentives and financing and other areas. So thanks Farhad. So where this started from, where we are at with the scope of work, is the City Council did approve a scope of work for this climate action plan goal back in March, April, and where they landed was they wanted more information on the cost effectiveness to electrify existing buildings in Menlo Park to meet the goal by 2030, and then look at potential policy pathways that may also get us there. And so the milestones, we're probably about a month behind schedule, but still on target to meet the City Council meeting timeline in August. It's the end of August. And I'm sorry, hold on a second. Thank you. Just tagging in the other partner here. And so what I want to emphasize going forward is that this is a working draft. So the attachment to the staff report, staff is also still reviewing a lot of the analysis, the cost effectiveness analysis, and the policy options, and and still thinking in a lot of ways of what else could be done to really move this forward. And so it's definitely not finalized, and there is time to have discussion before this topic is presented to the City Council on August 31st. And at the end of the presentation, I do provide a timeline of kind of where the Environmental Quality Commission can provide additional feedback before items or additional topics are discussed in this area to the City Council. So I do want to again emphasize that it's a working draft. We're looking to finalize this document by August, late August. And so there is time for the commission to review this at their regular meeting next month to finalize any advice or feedback to the City Council. And with that, I'm going to hand this off to, I believe Blake is up first on the slides. Thank you.
Thanks. Congratulations, Commissioners Evans and was it Payne? Is that what I saw? Yes, congrats to you both, and thanks so much for your service. It's a great group I'm seeing here, so thanks to you all. Just wanted to go through market readiness, which is a big topic on electrification at the onset. My background's in plumbing and space heating system design for commercial and residential buildings, so I know a decent amount about this stuff. Essentially, the technology is available for all system types and for decades in most cases. Contractors regionally are familiar, all of them are familiar with heat pump space heating, some with heat pump water heating. On the cooking side, it's pretty simple for residential, but not everyone's familiar with all electric commercial kitchens on the contractor side. With clothes drying, small dryers, yes. Large laundromats, less familiarity. And then with pools, from our research, some contractors are familiar with heat pumps, some of the pool contractors. And then on the right, we have some of the more challenging building types. Those tend to be on the water heating side, buildings that use a lot of water heating, large commercial buildings, cooking, restaurants with limited site electrical capacity. And on the space heating side, labs and certain existing systems, VAV reheat systems in commercial office spaces. We have a couple contractor lists here that are hyperlinked for contractors in the area who are good at all electric buildings. And then just noted some other cities that are working on the topic of existing building electrification: Berkeley, Half Moon Bay, Palo Alto, San Francisco, and New York are some. There are others.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Farhad. Thanks for the introduction, Rebecca. And yeah, so I'll pick it up here. I'll be presenting, I think, on the next several slides. So what incentives and financing options are available to a local jurisdiction to promote existing building electrification? When you think about this, there's some opportunities for a lead role that a jurisdiction could have and some opportunities for advocacy roles. In terms of a lead role, there are opportunities to develop new incentive programs. Redwood City actually just started some modest incentives for existing building electrification. The funding sources can be varied. We've identified through a literature review a utility users tax as a pretty common approach, or a powerful approach, I'll say. And it's one that has been recently looked at by City of Berkeley and City of Albany. It's certainly possible to partner with other agencies. We've also found precedent of partnering with BACMed, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. It is important to electrify municipal buildings as well to lead the way and demonstrate leadership. Municipal financing can help with that, either through green bonds or other local taxes. Those are kind of the financing approaches that we've identified so far that a jurisdiction can operate as a lead. They can also serve as an advocacy role, and this is pretty important because a jurisdiction doesn't necessarily have all of the levers by which to provide financing. So relying on utility partnerships with the local CCA, BayREN, these are very important to do. Peninsula Clean Energy will be coming out with an on-bill financing approach, I believe later this year, within the next several months. This is a utility customer loan. Another on-bill financing approach is known as tariffed on-bill financing. My understanding is that this has to be approved at the Public Utilities Commission for either investor-owned utility to administer. And this is a utility investment that's tied to the utility meter. It's not rather than being a customer loan. Of course, a jurisdiction can always share resources that would enable electrification. That's incentives from partners, directing folks to the on-bill financing that Peninsula Clean Energy will be providing. We've identified some other financing options as part of this literature review that we did. Electrification as a service partnership has come up, tax credits, deductions and rebates and loan programs that are available at the state can be promoted at the local level. So we also, the investor-owned utilities are performing, I should say, two cost-effectiveness analyses that look at existing building electrification. They have some commonalities, and this slide basically provides the methodology that's common across both of these studies. There's a non-residential study that looked at a life cycle period of about 15 years, and a low-rise residential study that looked at 30-year life cycles. It uses two benefit metrics that I'll be presenting on subsequent slides. The on-bill metric uses the Peninsula Clean Energy Utility Rate Schedule and has some assumptions for energy inflation and discount rates. There's also a time-dependent valuation metric, which is a societal value or cost. It includes things like carbon emissions and grid strain. Cost effectiveness is measured in terms of a benefit to cost ratio and net present value. And we examined 3 vintages in each of these, the residential and the non-residential studies, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We looked at 2 prototypes in the residential study, a single family 2,700 square foot home and a low-rise multifamily 7,000 square foot building that has 8 dwelling units in it. On the non-residential side, we looked at 5 prototypes so far. There's actually 2 more coming. But the 5 so far that we have analysis for is office, retail, warehouse, and 2 types of restaurants. A quick service, which is kind of like your McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, or kind of a burrito shop, and a full service restaurant, which is a sit down dining with dishware. Okay, we'll start with the residential cost effectiveness results, and pardon the brevity. We're trying to have the presentation be fairly contained. There is more detail available in the documents that are provided as attachments as part of tonight's agenda item. Very briefly, in the residential setting, heat pumps are TDV cost effective when using the 2022 TDV metric. This is the metric that will be used the next good cycle and does recognize the very large impacts that fossil fuel usage has on our emissions. It includes methane, things like methane leakage, and our long-term renewable portfolio standard goals. Heat pumps are on-bill cost effective when they're paired with on-site solar PV. Not so much in other scenarios that were examined under these assumptions. This table and below here is a particular subset of the results, the measure packages that were analyzed. And the thing that's unique about them is that they add the layered incentives available from Peninsula Clean Energy and from Bayren. And those incentives have to be on high efficiency equipment. So like a SEER 21 heat pump space heater or a NEA Tier 3 heat pump water heater. And what you can see is we have the 3 vintages that were analyzed here. The gross measure, the incremental cost. So if you were to replace with an electric solution, this is the incremental cost that's going to be paid as opposed to replacing like for like fossil gas. Here are the incentives, and note that this incentive is currently $2,500 for the water heater. However, it is a temporary amount that is $2,500 and is going to go down to $2,000 in the next few months. So for the long-term analysis of this measure, we've chosen to go with the future amount that we're anticipating for that incentive. So you see the utility cost impacts here. So a negative value is actually a cost increase. And the heat pump water here does save on bill immediately. But what we're seeing is, the net present value over 30 years in the realm of negative $3,000 for the space heater currently, in the realm of a few $100s for the heat pump water heater. And this is such a small amount over 30 years. It's, it's really any one of our assumptions that could be tweaked a little bit could tip this another way. So we can sharpen our pencils a bit and look at that, but this is essentially cost neutral. On the non-residential side, I've done my best to summarize the findings here, and I apologize. The report that was provided as an attachment to this agenda item, it does not include the most recent results. We have to go back and update them a little bit more. So this is more accurate. For the so I have the prototypes listed on the left, and then across the columns we have several different packages that were analyzed. The all electric code minimum, so it's basically just fuel switching your hot water and your space heating appliances. And in the case of the restaurants, we also did look at electrifying cooking. The next column over is all electric plus efficiency. So again, electrifying your end uses and then layering on efficiency measures. These are building efficiency measures, which are things like window film or lighting retrofits. And then the farthest column on the right is fuel switching plus adding solar PV on top. So for your retail building, this is your lowest hanging fruit. We couldn't identify a cost-effective route just for fuel switching, right from the gate, but we did identify that you can fuel switch cost effectively and on bill and TDV if you layer on efficiency measures or solar PV. So we're close there. For the office building, this is a central space heating system that is pretty challenging to electrify, and in some instances you have to add physical space to the mechanical room to do so. We couldn't identify a cost-effective measure. Now, I'll be clear, just to be clear here, these yellow cells, these are kind of my gut feelings here. I've made them yellow. We haven't actually analyzed these yet. They can be included in later packages, but I think that if we add in efficiency measures and solar PV onto the office building, I think we can achieve TDV cost effectiveness. On-bill cost effectiveness is still a little bit far out. The quick service restaurants, we are able to get TDV cost effectiveness when we're excluding the cooking if we layer on efficiency measures. I think that we can get TDV cost effectiveness excluding the cooking at the code minimum, but we have to look at 2022 TDV. We haven't done that yet for the quick service restaurant. Similar for the restaurant, for the full service restaurant, this is a more energy intensive type of restaurant and much higher hot water loads, much higher cooking loads. So we actually couldn't identify a cost effective package just yet. On the warehouse, there's very limited efficiency measures that we identified at this time for the warehouse. So the only scenario where we found it to be cost effective is adding some solar to offset the electricity usage in the warehouse. Warehouses have ample roof space, so that is a fairly straightforward measure. So, forgive me if this is jumping around a bit, but we tried to come up with a good flow here. I think building off of the cost effectiveness, we next need to consider what does that mean for our most vulnerable citizens. Using some some American Community Survey data, we identified that there's at least 1,500 housing units in Menlo Park with occupants that are below 30% of the area median income level. And these are mostly renters, and they spend about 7 to 10% of their income on their energy bills. And that's a very sizable piece. So how can we ensure that electrification makes sense for everyone? We believe we did a literature review, we found some equitable policy characteristics, ensure access to incentives, they ensure bill reductions, they avoid increasing debt, and they avoid renovictions. That's when a landlord makes renovations and then evicts tenants, or may increase rents as a result of that. So there needs to be some controls in place to ensure that the most vulnerable have some stability as we electrify. The last bullet point here is partnering with local community-based organizations is critical to facilitate honest discussions and long-term commitment. We want to make sure that everybody knows what's happening, why it's happening, when it's happening, so that this is a community agreed upon decision. I think one important tool that we identified is the rental housing policies, and we identified a couple of different flavors of this. Rental housing performance standards are standards that cities invoke that say you have to upgrade your building to have this amount of energy use intensity or these energy efficiency features. Whenever, every 2 years we're going to check for this, or every time that your tenant moves out, we're going to check for this. These are often paired with inspection policies. There's 26 cities in California that currently have rental housing inspection policies. And at least 6 cities outside of California have rental housing performance standards that have energy efficiency requirements paired with them. So this is a important aspect to ensure not only compliance with electrification, but also habitable living standards and equitable outcomes in a multitude of ways. So then we thought, how can we group together some of these policy options? We came up with 5. The first 3 are listed on this slide, and they are not intended to be mutually exclusive. My personal thoughts is that we need to do as much as we can. So let's consider all of the above when it comes to this. Number one is public engagement and education. Sorry for the title. So this could be concierge assistance for residents that points towards financing and permit education, piloting projects in low to moderate income communities, and outreach and forums for residents and businesses. I believe that Rebecca can touch on some outreach that's going to be starting shortly, community engagement facilitation. Number two is generating funds for financing. So, and these are options that council can direct city staff to. So this could be instituting fees for building projects that generate greenhouse gas emissions. There's a couple of examples of how that can be structured with San Luis Obispo and Watsonville. Increasing the utility users tax could be a very powerful tool. And depending on how much it's being increased, it would potentially be a ballot measure. And City of Berkeley, their ballot measure failed to increase their utility users tax, but City of Albany's ballot measure did pass. This was last year. The city can partner with local lenders to provide streamlined financing options. This is more commonly done outside of California. The state does provide through their hub of energy efficiency financing a lot of loan tools, but this was something that jurisdictions can potentially do. Number three, time certain building performance standards. This basically sets a deadline for electrification, so 2030 as council's goal. And it requires reporting and or regular inspections to ensure compliance. So there's some pros to this. It's easy to understand. It reduces missed opportunities. If you are doing a retrofit and you're aware of this deadline, you're going to electrify at that time. And it captures all buildings. The cons are increased staff responsibilities. It's not easy to go into buildings and inspect, and it requires some staff time. I believe the fee often that's charged in my city, El Cerrito, for rental housing inspection is on the order of $200 to $400 per unit. If somebody has an emergency where they don't want to be without hot water, and the local contractor doesn't have a heat pump water heater on their truck, then the emergency replacement becomes a challenge. So it is still challenging in those situations. It does rely on incentive availability because of the cost effectiveness findings that I described earlier. Right now, we're not quite there to prove cost effectiveness for electrification. Number four is permitting options, and there's several different types of permitting options that we identified. So they're A through F listed here, and they are kind of ramping up in stringency, generally speaking. So heat pumps, making sure heat pumps are installed whenever air conditioning is getting installed is a pretty straightforward one. Having an electric ready panel when you are doing a panel upgrade, or having a solar PV installation, which often is coming with an electrical panel upgrade. C, having heat pumps installed when you're doing a HVAC or a hot water replacement voluntarily. So if you're performing an addition and you need a larger water heater, or if you decide that you need to relocate your system, your equipment, and you're going to be replacing it, then make sure that's a heat pump. Item D is having a heat pump installed when you're doing additions to single family homes. This is when the HVAC or hot water is within the scope of that project, which is probably going to be the case again, because you're going to have larger square footage. Item E is making sure whenever you add a new pool that's served by a heat pump. Item F is electric appliances and alterations, including HVAC and hot water. I believe this is also if it's not necessarily if you are replacing the appliance, but if you are touching any portion of the hot water system, including the piping, or if you're touching any portion of the HVAC system, then you'd be required to replace it with a heat pump. So these are easy paths to enforcement. This is something your city already does. And there's opportunity to integrate incentives that are available now and probably will be coming online shortly. At the permit desk, you can educate and direct the applicant to these. Cons are that it can add still significant costs if there's no incentives, and even when there are incentives, it may not be enough. It may decrease permit application even further than it is right now. I heard a stat today, don't quote me on this, but it's something like 10 to 20% of appliance replacements that should be permitted are actually permitted. So this is actually, we may even have less efficacy here. Okay, and time of sale is option number 5. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can either encourage electrification at the time of real estate sale or transfer. If you have an existing tax that you can refund or rebate to the buyer or the seller by performing electrification within a certain time span around the transfer, or you require upgrades at the time of sale. And Davis and San Francisco, they don't require electrification, but they do require a certain set of upgrades. Davis had I believe it was some sort of disaster with their students at UC Davis. And this was in the 70s, and they instituted a policy that if your building is not up to code at the time of transfer, you have to, if you did unpermitted work, you have to bring it up to code. And they have a very high compliance rate with that. I believe it's in the over 90 percentile. San Francisco has something in the realm of $1,000 to $2,000 of basic upgrades in rental properties. These are things like low flow fixtures and basic insulation. Pros with this option are that you can electrify whole buildings at a time. So really you do all 4 appliances: cooking, water heating, HVAC, and laundry. And upgrades can be negotiated between the buyer and the seller, so it can be part of the transaction who carried that. Cons are that it can add significant costs, and not every building is going to have a transfer. So you can't capture all buildings. So I'm going to pass it to Myra. We had these 5 options, and she's going to go over how we went about sorting them.
Great, thanks for how. Can everyone hear me? Great, and thank you, Rebecca, for the introduction. So yeah, I'll just quickly be going over how we judge the various policy options and what our preliminary findings were. So once we developed the policy options, we wanted to develop a method to judge the various options so that we can make recommendations on how to prioritize and what the timeline might look like for implementation. So what we did is we developed 5 different criteria, and you can see those 5 criteria on the slides here. So each policy option was judged against each of these criteria. They are ease of implementation or process. So that's more on the implementation side. How would this affect city resources and things like that? And then convenience was another factor here, and that's more on the project itself, what impact it would have on the developer or the homeowner. Equitable, so how would this impact disadvantaged communities? Cost effectiveness, how would this impact project costs overall for market rate and affordable housing, for example? And then effectiveness overall, so what kind of impact would this policy option have? So a few things to note. All criteria are rated equally, and as you can see, each criteria has 3 components to it. Each component was given a point. So for each criteria, a policy option could score anywhere between 0 to 3. So the lowest score possible is a 0, highest score possible is 15. And as we've said at the beginning, this is still a work in progress. These are the results of our first pass at this. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to provide it. And so what I'll be going over on the next slide are our results. So probably the next slide, thank you. So once we compared the different policy options against these 5 criteria, there was some back and forth on how we would, this had go through some revisions. What we found is for the highest ranking options, we really found 2 stood out. And those are option 2, generating funds. And this one received a score of 10. And this one was ranked highly because it compared to permit desk options. This one is it's a more convenient policy because it doesn't impact the project directly. This is where incentives could become available so that it could potentially make some of these permit desk options more cost effective. It can be designed to generate and redistribute funds equitably. So it receives a high score there for equitability, and then for equity. And then finally, this one could be implemented by city staff relatively easily or in partnership with the utility. Again, this is relative compared to the permit desk options. Another one that received a high rank was option 4A, and this is installing a heat pump at an AC installation. So the reason this one ranked highly is because AC retrofits or relocations is already a part of the scope of work. So if an AC replacement is already part of the scope, adding in the heat pump would not terribly affect the project's timeline and budget. There could be a small incremental cost, but compared to some of these other options, this one seemed to be the easiest one to implement. And again, it doesn't add a high cost to the project if an AC was already in the scope to be replaced. On the other end of the spectrum, what we found were the following 3 options scored on the low end. So the policy option for a heat pump installation upon voluntary replacement, that one scored low for a variety of reasons. As we've talked about, as Farhad mentioned during the previous slides, it's susceptible to permit dodging, so that could reduce the effectiveness of this policy option. It would require high levels of engagement on the city's on behalf of the city, and it could require some additional staff resources or coordination. It could increase the project scope of work, as this is a voluntary replacement. And there could be incentives available, but as we saw, they probably won't be enough to cover the full costs, at least for the incentives that are available right now. Option 4D also ranked, I'm trying to remember what the scores were here. So just for reference, option 4C received a score of 4, and so did option 4D. And for a lot of the same reasons as option 4C, susceptible to permit dodging, increases project scope of work, project cost, would require staff resources or coordination with other outside agencies. And then finally, option 3 received a score of 5. And again, this one would also require a lot of resources from the city, would require a disclosure program to become an enforceable mandate. This could impact this could add on to a homeowner or a property manager's cost. And Farhad, I think you can go to the next slide. I'm not sure who. Yeah, Blake. All right, take it away, Blake.
Hello, Blake again, and what we're all here for: greenhouse gas emission savings of different policy options. These are ranked in order from most to least opportunity, and there's no timing here, which we'd like to work out through the rest of the summer. So each of these is the savings over a given year times 8 years, which is how long the policy would be in place if it's January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2030. At the top, we have point of sale, which has the most savings potential, but as discussed previously, could be very controversial. Whenever we're talking about existing building electrification policies, this is brought up. Realtors tend to tend to be opposed to it. Below that, We have, I'm noting here that business as usual and marketing and education, for both of those that we assumed over 8 years, that could have a 10% impact on the single family home side. So somewhat significant impact if that forecast is right. Other effective measures we see are at the point of alteration and repair, because those are a lot of those. Also on the panel upgrade, which sometimes might be at the same time as an alteration or repair. Lower than that, we have the water heating permit and HVAC permit. It's the low permit rate that's really impacting these. So the math here, which we could update, is just number of water heating permits times greenhouse gas emission savings per water heater replaced times the 8 years. And then you can see the other items there. Farhad, do you want to go to the next slide? This is if we add all the items in. I'm going to give the same apology as Farhad earlier. This doesn't precisely match what's in the report, but this is the more accurate version, and we'll update that draft. As you can see, with the kitchen sink of policies, we're still not meeting the goal that's in the climate action plan that's currently posted online. I know it's being updated at the moment. Getting to 36,000 metric tons per year of savings. One of the main reasons, besides the short timeline, one issue is just getting to 2030, which I can't commend you more on that date. It's shorter than a lot of equipment lasts. So if equipment replacement is a reason that we're doing things, it's not all going to be replaced in that time frame. And there's the permit uptake rate issue. So what we have here in green is the GHG savings if we're able to capture every water heater that burns out. And on the left, we have the GHG savings if we capture every water heater that's permitted. And you can see there's a big discrepancy there. So increasing permit rates would be a good way to increase the effectiveness of this policy. On the cooking and clothes drying, you see 0 there because they're typically not permitted upon replacement.
All right, I think this is Rebecca.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Blake. So the next steps, just to, again, go back to what I was talking about in the beginning, is we're looking to finalize the cost effectiveness analysis and policy pathways report by August 25th. So staff is still reviewing this, like I said before, and looking at, the policy pathways put forward, understanding how it may work, if there's additional foundational work that's needed. I think one main finding too in looking at the policy pathways is just highlighting the fact that in order to do this equitable, or even to get the permit compliance that we need, there's a lot of foundational programs or potential other ordinances before we can get to the mandates, and those could take some time to get to, but at least we have some knowledge of like what we need to do, again, foundationally, to get to a point where we can ensure the transition happens in a cost-effective and equitable manner, and that it's going to also be very effective, because we do want to see the greenhouse gas reductions to meet the goal. So because the cost effectiveness analysis and policy pathway report is going to be finalized later in August, there is still the opportunity for the EQC to weigh in, provide feedback and advice to the City Council at their August 18th meeting. And then the next step after that is for it to have a study session at a City Council meeting. It's tentatively scheduled for August 31st to present the cost effectiveness analysis. So we're trying to do this in 2 parts, because there's just so much data, a lot of questions, and just making sure everyone's comfortable first with the cost effectiveness analysis, and then having a conversation later in September, October, about the policy pathways and a potential kind of roadmap to getting there. But at the August 31st meeting, I do want to emphasize that the City Council will be presented with the cost effectiveness analysis and the potential policy pathways. So they'll have all of that information. So if they want to, provide direction or at that time, they will be able to do that if they desire. But again, it's definitely a meaty, well, I don't try to say meat anymore because I'm trying not to eat meat, but it's very much a beans type of approach here. So to make sure that everyone's on the same page going forward and making an informed decision. And so what we're seeking and at a staff level is that, you know, either in October or before October, that the city council will direct staff on the next steps for cap number 1. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you again to the TRC team and DNV and Ron Lafrance for working very hard on this. And I didn't also mention that TRC did support us when we worked on the REACH codes for new construction or new buildings. And so very, you know, familiar in this area.
Thank you. Before we have discussion, we will open this item up for public comment. So Rebecca, do we have any public comment on this item at this time?
Thank you, Chair Price. So at this time, if there is any member of the public that would like to speak on this agenda item, that is review and discuss the cost effectiveness analysis and policy pathways for electrifying Menlo Park's existing buildings, you can use the raised hand feature next to your name, and I'll be able to unmute you. If you're on a landline, if you press *9, I can also unmute you as well. And you'll have up to 3 minutes to provide your public comment. And with that, I do have 2 hands raised. So I'll start with James T. And James, if you could please state your full name, that would be helpful to capture in the minutes. And I have unmuted you, and so you should be able to speak now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is James Tuleya, T-U-L-E-Y-A. I'm a resident of Sunnyvale. I'm in my climate advocacy role. I'm the chair of Carbon Free Silicon Valley. I've made public comments in Menlo Park before on behalf of building electrification. My day job is in residential energy efficiency, and also relevant for my comments is I worked for 8 years for PG&E in their energy efficiency department, and doing mostly residential energy efficiency, both program design and implementation, as well as regulatory affairs. And one of my roles was involved in a midstream and upstream program that provided incentives to distributors of HVAC equipment. And I worked with an implementation company called Energy Solutions. And so that's connected to what I would like to suggest. TRC may have already looked into this, but I think it's important for this report and for your considerations of Menlo Park demonstrating leadership in this area is to take into account or incorporate how the very nearly coming tech incentive program that's coming via the SB 1477 law, and it's already been subject to the CPUC decision over a year ago that established it, and it will be funded out of cap and trade funds. And it's being run, the implementation company selected is Energy Solutions. And the budget, overall budget for the next 4 years is 120 million for that. And it will be focused on technology and equipment for clean heating, so water heating and space heating. So it's tied in with exactly what you're talking about. Taking out 4 million for admin, there's 116 million left for incentives that are going to go or expected to go upstream to contractors, manufacturers, distributors, and or retailers, along with some efforts in consumer education, outreach, and workforce education and training. And so my suggestion is that just like you've already incorporated things that you know are happening with the TDV value in the next building code that's coming out, that this is a real and significant program with lots of money and efforts around consumer outreach and workforce education and training that may and could significantly assist you in what you're trying to do, and you should incorporate those ideas and or think about how this program can fit into what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public commenter is Diane Bailey. I have unmuted you. You should be able to speak now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Diane Bailey. I'm with Menlo Spark, and I've spoken with many of you on this topic, and some of these comments might sound familiar, but I just want to note that I agree with everything that James just talked to you about, and I'm going to try to build on those comments. I really appreciate the hard work and expertise of this team, TRC, DNV, and PCE. I think this is a really great start. And there's actually a lot of similarities in this report compared with the report that Menlo Spark put out last week. And so that was really great to see. We fully acknowledge that policies on electrification are not easy. And if they were, other cities would have done them by now. But there's a large group of cities working towards this right now, as Blake mentioned earlier. And we think it's essential to stick with the current Cap 1 goal of a 95% conversion by 2030. Just want to quickly recognize the urgency of the climate crisis that really underpins all of these efforts, that we're already paying an invisible climate fee through increased insurance premiums, taxes to help fight wildfires, loss of outdoor recreation and sports during wildfire season, and a long list of other items. And this invisible climate fee really dwarfs the investment costs needed to electrify the current methane gas uses. So recently we've heard from some very conservative agencies like IEA that issued warnings that we need to stop all new fossil fuel uses now to have a fighting chance to limit warming to 1.5 degrees or to meet our Paris goals. And that really means an intervention to prevent any new methane gas heaters and water heaters right here in Menlo Park. So to electrify as quickly as possible and to do it in an affordable and equitable way, and to prevent the new fossil fuel devices from being installed, we have 4 basic steps that we're recommending that I hope can be part of the guidelines and recommendations to City Council. And the first is to put equity front and center, and to that end to ensure that whole home retrofits for low-income homes are provided at no cost at all to the homeowners, whether renters or single-family homeowners. This would only cost $3 million per year over 10 years, and it would cover 1,500 homes or 10% of the population, either through a utility user tax or other funds. And this could be added to the current low-income turnkey electrification program that PCE is just about to launch. We highly recommend utilizing the REACH code process because it was so successful for Menlo Park and doing a REACH code 2.0. And that would fold in larger projects and permitted replacements for existing buildings, so including alterations and a host of other things. And we know that this type of policy could have exemptions for emergency situations or preventing hardship. We think that support programs for people who are trying to electrify and encountering issues are really essential. And that could be technical support or concierge service. It could include free proactive electrification plans. And part of that would also include permit streamlining and community outreach. And lastly, to build momentum and support, we think that a resolution to end fossil fuel use would be an important way to get everyone's attention that this is a critical issue throughout Menlo Park. There's one really important policy that I want to recommend to be included in TRC's report, and that is direct installation programs. And I see that I don't have a lot of time to go into these programs, but I'll note that SMUD in Sacramento has very successful programs that have proven that they can cut costs in half for installing heat pumps. And they have a number of ways that they cut costs, and we can put those comments in writing. But I think this is something that if affordability is essential to Menlo Park, we really need to make it a priority and explore these direct installation programs with PCE. I see that I'm out of time, but I want to thank you for this opportunity. This is such an important discussion, and I look forward to continuing it. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, I do not see any other hands raised. You may continue.
Thank you. So we're returning the conversation to the commission for discussion. So I don't know if somebody has, yes, Commissioner Payne.
Yeah, can we ask clarifying questions of the presenters at this point?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a couple quick questions. First, thank you, Blake, Myra, and Farhad for the presentation. There was a lot of very useful information in there for us to digest. First, for Blake, I was wondering, you mentioned that lab spaces are particularly difficult to electrify space and water heating. I was wondering if you could give some of the reasons why that is.
Sure. More difficult. I do want to note that I see that as a design constraint rather than an impossibility. First, on the space heating side, labs have huge air change rates, which means they just pump through a lot more air than almost any other building type. Typically, it's 12 air changes per hour versus 2 air changes per hour in an office. That's a lot of air moving, which means a lot of air you need to heat if you're going to heat it. And it starts to become, starts to create larger systems that you have to build. That said, a lot of the advanced kind of MEP firm, mechanical electrical plumbing design firms in the region have started to really tackle labs with some innovative all electric system types using heat recovery on both the exhaust air and on the chilled water side of things. So we are seeing a lot more all electric labs, like a lot more this year than last year, and almost zero a couple of years ago. On the water heating side, anything that uses a lot of hot water, and labs can use a lot of hot water in the sterilization process.
Okay, so in both cases, it's a matter of the increased capacities required. The technologies currently just aren't as mature for those, but you're starting to see more of those technologies developed?
Right, on the HVAC side, seeing maturity develop, and on the water heating side, it's just so many more water heaters that you need, and you don't need economy of scale with those.
Okay.
It's a linear increase.
Yes. All right, and then another question for you was, you mentioned the business as usual in the marketing and education. You guys had a sort of a 10% assumption there. I was wondering, can you speak to how you arrived at that figure?
I actually forced everyone to, we're getting some feedback, I think, from your mic. I forced everyone on the call to vote, a silent vote on 3, what percent. So it is not extraordinarily accurate, but there isn't a great way to forecast that. And we're happy to update that figure if you think there's a more accurate way to do it. We don't have a previous 10 years to work off of because we weren't at the point we are now with electrification. So it's just a best assumption from experts. Happy to update it.
And I would just add to that as well. I mean, when you look at just policy in general, like when we've done reusable bag ordinance, you usually get about 10%, 15% is really great. I mean, that means you're doing a lot of outreach, education, and you're getting that extra 5% that would normally do it, but we call them the early adopters, who are actually actively seeking out to do this work, and then looking at the incentives as well. I think there's always a question as to whether incentives do you push people that would have not normally done it to do it, or whether they're helping people transition faster because the incentives are there versus them maybe taking a few more years to get around to it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And then I had one question for Farhad, which was, and I might have just missed this, but you mentioned when you were showing the cost effectiveness of some of the just the electrification stuff early on, that with solar PV, it switches it to the cost effective side. Did you show a summary of those numbers just for, it was in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 for the space heaters and a few $100s for the water heaters. What would those numbers look like with the solar PV included?
Great, yeah, that is in the study. Let me bring that up, but it does come out to be on-bill cost effective when you add solar PV. So let's see here. It would be, so for a single family dwelling, Over 30 years, you're looking at positive $7,000 to $9,000 for heat pump space heating if it's combined with 2.8 kilowatts of PV. And if a heat pump water heater is combined with 2.8 kilowatts of PV, it's about $6,000 net present value.
All right, thank you. Those are all my questions for now.
I have a question first of all, Farhad and Blake, thank you so much. You guys, this is great first step on this sort of novel policy. So thank you. One of the questions I had was, how did you guys choose the 2,700 square foot for the single family residential? It seems high for Menlo Park to me, but I don't know. So that was pretty close to a median that we identified when looking at some of the property data. Ron Lafrance, who's on the line, also indicated that was what his experience demonstrated as being a fairly average value for Menlo Park. But the statewide analysis looked at, I think, a 1,600 square foot single family home, which is probably on the small side. But if there's another point of comparison, I would look at that study. It does use PG&E rates, but at the moment they're similar enough to Peninsula Clean Energy rates that it provides some another point of reference. Great. So just as a data point for you all, and you may know this, but I contacted PCE, who said that it's very similar to your 1,500 homes that are low income. That they reported that there are 1,400 homes on bill assistance, so CARE or FARA. So we were kind of using that number, a very similar number too, and thinking about how we would potentially pay for the whole home electrifications. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, and in terms of the equity issues, did you look into sort of the turnkey approach programs, and then not so related to equity, but just more broadly, the feasibility issues? Did you look at a concierge services and like how big an impact do you think that could have? So in terms of the, I forget the term you just called it, Commissioner Gal. Concierge or? Concierge, the one before that, but electrification as a service, where there's an entity that comes in and takes your building and says, okay, here's, has the hammer, has the equipment, and they go for it. We identified a few private entities that provide that service, like Block Power is one, that's a multifamily building specialist. Spark Fund is a commercial building specialist. Until now, we have not identified a jurisdiction that has partnered or has, in some sort of way established a way to direct customers towards that type of entity. But we do think that's a good idea. It does take staff resources, obviously, but there needs to be identification of the ideal customers by someone. And it's possible those private entities do that themselves. It's possible could need some help from a government. So I believe that there's not, we haven't identified precedents yet, so I don't have a good idea of how effective it could be, but it's certainly an option. Okay. Thank you. So on the utility rates going forward, we know natural gas rates are going up. Did you call out, I didn't see in the report, like specifically what your rate escalation assumptions were? They are, yes, they are in the realm of, it's a little bit higher for gas than it is for electricity in the next several years. And then it flatlines to about 1% each. And we didn't come up with these. We relied on a macroeconomic analysis known as E3. We would like to update these soon. We just haven't found a great, I'll share my screen and you can see the rates escalation. I guess my request would be, can you include those in the final report? Can you just expose what those are? Yes. That's important. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll leave it there if other people have questions.
I think we had Commissioner Evans. Oh, you're on mute.
My goodness, this is the third time I've done that. Well, I guess it's my first meeting, so I'm allowed. Thank you, Farhad, Blake, and Myra for all the time to present to us and put together this report. It's I have read it and it is wonderfully dense, and it's clear that you put a lot of time and energy into it. So thank you. I wanted to follow up on Josie's question about what she called the concierge services. I too have been, even though this is my first meeting since I was formally appointed at the end of May, I've been doing a lot of reading and deep diving into all of this, and I have been interested in possibly having some initial meetings between the city and other relevant combinations of us and maybe housing commissioners, speak with some of these concierge services, in particular ones that focus on, at least historically, lower income communities like Block Power, to see more precisely how they work and what they would cost. Because I'd love to get your thoughts on that from the three of you as well. And it was also part of why I think I was even increasingly interested in perhaps joining the building electrification subcommittee, if that were to become an option at some point later on when we're still in the midst of discussing this on the agenda. And my understanding of Block Power is that they have a pretty unique, well, this is what I've read and what I've heard on podcasts, but they have a unique business model where they have extensive experience working with low-income communities in Brooklyn, and now they have an outpost in Oakland, and they have venture funding, so they've proven success, and they put together a very prescriptive analysis of what needs to be done building by building. I think the focus is multifamily, but they may do some single family, I don't know, and then project managing it to completion. And so after this meeting, I was interested in possibly setting up a meeting to speak with one of the representatives of that organization, just so our city can learn more about what that would look like. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I've spoken with, I guess he's the CEO or something of that person. Black Power. Yeah, so I really like what he's doing. Yeah. I think we might both be from Philadelphia originally. They are kind of multifamily focused. Yeah. It reminds me of a couple other types of service. There's an old thing called an ESCO model that's been around for a while that's for commercial buildings and works better at scale. There's also a group called that's now called Radiant Labs that did something called Snug Home. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was focused on single family homes, and they're out of Boulder, Colorado. It seemed like that didn't scale very well, but I love the idea and I want it to work. So happy to include it in the report. And maybe, I think do you guys work with Block Power at all, Farhad? I think we work with them on our implementation side. So we might be able to set something up. I'll reach out to Doug about it.
Please, that'd be great.
Thank you. Commissioner Cabot.
Thank you. So I will have some comments and substantive questions later, but I had a couple of quick clarifying questions about the rate escalation. That one where it rises a bit for natural gas higher than electric at first, but then they both go to a plateau of 1% per year, so below an inflation rate. So they're declining in real terms. That does not seem at all consistent with the findings of the recent PUC on-bank hearings that looked at what I call the drought effect, which is when you decrease the flow of a commodity through a fixed cost asset like pipelines, the rates go up because there's a smaller denominator to collect the fixed costs across. And in the 30-year period, that looks like that'll be big. Would it be possible to include that effect in the next version of the study in time for council to see that more likely effect of what will happen as the state gets serious about fighting climate change and gas rates go up?
Yeah, that seems important.
I agree. I think that that is a very reasonable request. I will inquire with the IOU's team and the team that's leading the residential analysis, Frontier Energy. We are also eager to use an updated set of escalation rates. I believe the en banc rates go out to 2030. So, you know, we need something out to 2050, roughly speaking. And so the effect beyond that, it becomes uncertain what we should assume. I will reach out to a couple of folks. I'll aim to have updated escalation rates before the council meeting next up.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing I noticed from table 3, which is a very detailed table at the front of the report, it had emissions listed for each of the items and therms. And when I divide the pounds of emissions by the number of therms, I get a wide variety of results, from down to roughly 4 pounds per therm saved by some measures to up to about 9.7 pounds per therm saved by other measures. And I know that just the combustion of methane emits 11.6 pounds per therm. So I don't understand why none of the numbers are that high and why every measure has a different result. And so is there an explanation?
So this is just to clarify, this is figure 3 in the policy options document. That is the single family fuel substitution cost effectiveness results.
Let me reopen it. It's figure 3, the very dense table.
The red and green and
with red and green areas. Yep. But about in the center of it, you've got the number of therms per year saved and the number of pounds of emissions per year reduced. And I can divide one by the other, and I was expecting to see 11.6 right down the column, and it's all over the place, and it doesn't go to 11.6, which makes me want to ask the next clarifying question, and that is, what was the emissions factor you used for electricity, given that Menlo Park is on the PCE electric blend for 98% of its residents, and that PCE has gone to 100% carbon free on an annual basis?
These emissions factors, Commissioner Cabot, are spit out from the software. They're not intended to be accurate for this particular purpose. I'd say Blake's calculations are going to be more accurate for that purpose. They do account for time. My hunch is that there is some time sensitivity with the electricity consumption that's happening when you go electric, and there's a higher emissions factor with the electricity than what Peninsula Clean Energy is providing. So this analysis is not specifically a greenhouse gas mitigation analysis. It's more focused on the costs and benefits. So I think that's where the discrepancy lies.
So for the other charts that we shared during this, Commissioner Cabot, for all those, we assume 0 emissions on the electric side by 2030. I think that's fair hourly, considering 2025 is the hourly goal for PCE. And then we assumed only combustion, because I had assumed the climate action plan also didn't include upstream fugitive methane emissions. So that's going to be the same linear factor that's in all those. And maybe, Farhad, we could discuss blocking out that column in the appendix, or just doing the math in Excel or something so that they line up. But the GHG emissions as presented, we're all assuming 0 emissions on the electric grid. And I did it I always work in metric tons, so I didn't do it in pounds, but at 0.00609 metric tons per therm or something like that.
Yeah, apologies for the confusion. It's probably worth just omitting, because there's no, disputing that we're going to be getting. The way to get to decarbonization is through electrification.
Okay, and so I'll address that in the substantive questions later. Thanks.
So speaking of later, I just wanted to draw our attention to where we are in time. So it's about it's just after 9:15. We know that this topic is extremely dense, as many people have cited, and we also know that we have the opportunity, like our previous topic, to potentially refer this report to a subcommittee to give comments back to staff and ahead of council reviewing this in a study session on the 31st. So one possibility is that we take that step. Before we took that step, I would like to put forward a motion that we have the opportunity to consider a new member for the building electrification subcommittee. Because I know we have heard that interest, and if before we refer something to a subcommittee, I'd rather have that subcommittee's membership rounded out. But if there's consensus that that's a direction we could move in to bring this, because I don't think we're going to be able to get through everything tonight. I think there is too much information. So if that's a direction people are willing to move in, then what I would propose, I would like to propose my motion. So I'll stop there and see if there's any appetite for that general direction.
So I would love to figure out the subcommittee issue. Because we have Farhad and Blake on the line, I would be in favor of, I don't want to go all night, but I'd be in favor of, I would be fine with another 30 to 45 minutes of just, I would, if I'm going to be on the subcommittee who's thinking about this, I'd really like to hear what the other commissioners' thoughts are before we get assigned that. But I'm fine having the subcommittee do some more deep dive on that.
Okay. So, and I agree, I would like to maximize the time we spend with Farhad and Blake and the rest of the team. So I'm gonna put forward my motion that we return to what Angie's comments were around her interest in potentially joining the building electrification committee. Sorry, I'm clearly tired. Is somebody willing to second that motion?
I second.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Payne.
Ooh, it's a three-way tie. Holy. Okay, now we can do a roll call vote on that motion.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to appoint Commissioner Evans to the Building Electrification Subcommittee, and that motion was put forth by Chair Price and seconded by Commissioner Payne. I'll take roll call. Commissioner Elkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Evans?
Aye.
Commissioner Gillard?
Aye.
Commissioner Payne?
Aye.
Commissioner Cabot?
Aye.
And Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
And then to return to so now we know we have a fully formed subcommittee that's invested in building electrification. And excuse me, no, Cody, sorry, I had a dog issue. In terms of a timeline for the conversation, why don't we agree on, why don't we agree to kind of have 20 more minutes discussion with the team now and conclude the meeting at 9:40. And then I think that's a positive direction to move in. So then I can return the meeting back to some of these deeper conversations with questions that we really want to highlight or sentiment that needs to be shared prior to the subcommittee breaking. So I ask people prioritize questions that we need to ask of the kind of consultants who are here with us this evening, and that people feel this is our opportunity to share sentiment ahead of the subcommittee's recommendation between now and the August meeting. So given that, what are the other items people would like to discuss or questions people would like to ask?
So I have one quick clarifying thing. So Farhad and Blake, am I right that, because sometimes when things look red, in your charts, that it's like flashes bad, right? But for something that was like $3,000 over 30 years in negative, right? Am I right that, is my math right, that that's basically $8 a month?
Let me bust out the calculator. But it sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to kind of like make sure I'm reading the table right, that like it's shouting like big numbers and it's red, but like when you get down to it over 30 years, it's actually like really small dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's it. That's my clarifying question.
I have a question about that then. Is there a reason why the information, is it presented in the standard fashion that the information would be presented in? Or is there a way to couch it in a different measurable way, right? Because I don't think people typically think on that time horizon in terms of, right, you see the amount as Commissioner Gaylord is suggesting. And so I just wonder if that's the typical format it's presented in, or if there is the option to modify to make it clear how the information, like how that would work as a consumer. It would be an increase of $8 per month. It would be an increase of X dollars. So maybe it's not per month, maybe it's per year, but just having a different chunk rather than just the lump sum, as if it's an upfront payment, when in effect, it's actually a payment over 30 years.
If I may share my screen, I can provide the more detailed table that is available in the cost effectiveness report. What I put into the slides was there for brevity. So I'll share briefly here what we have and the current depiction, and please let me know if this is acceptable or if you would prefer a different kind. But so what we have is, so here's the vintages, here's the measure, and then this is the utility cost savings in year one. So it's annual, it's an annual number rather than a monthly number. And then the average annual, which takes into account the impact of the escalation rates. So yes, we do have these kind of bright red cells, but we also do show some annual impact in the cells. Present these in future meetings if that's more informative.
I kind of agree with what Ryan was suggesting, especially when it goes to council. I think, some of us are energy nerds, the council generally isn't, but they think in terms of like, what's someone's monthly bill going to be? So I think if we can make it, or maybe just highlight that, this looks like a big number, but in reality, maybe in the report it says, or you could say it in the PowerPoint, that's $8 a month. The biggest numbers on this page come down to actually, yeah, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah, the measures I presented are not these exact same ones, but yes, point well taken, Commissioner, and we will provide that information on the slide.
Thank you. Commissioner Cabot, I see your virtual hand raised.
Thank you. As I look at the question that the council needs to be wrestling with, it's different than the way I read the report. The report is looking at cost effectiveness as though the customer was just trying to save a few bucks at their house and trying to choose what to do. And that's not what we're trying to do in climate preservation. We're trying to do what one of your criteria was, which was make something scalable, make a change that can catch on. And because we've got what we see at all different layers of government is lots of entities standing still and everyone waiting for someone else to move. I'm not going to act until I get a rebate. I'm not going to do this until that. Everyone's waiting, and the policymakers, if they're looking at this saying, I'm going to wait for something else, we're just at a standstill and we're eating the most valuable time on earth. So we need to start looking at this question of cost effectiveness and recognize how cost effective will climate change be and put it on the table. And it is not cost effective to have climate change. And these costs of these measures are less than those costs. And some people propose, miracle carbon capture and sequestration, and the proponents of it say it can be as cheap as $200 a ton. And so let's put that on the table and say, if you want to wait for a miracle that the proponents say they might get down to 200 a ton versus doing some of these other things at $40 a ton now, why wait to pay 200 when you could do this for 40? And I think we have to provide information to the council that help them see there is a reason to act and to lead. And we had great success with staff structure of a REACH code that was adopted now in dozens of cities in the Menlo Park style REACH code. And I think we can also help people, get moving forward with policy adoption in a way that's scalable. So there, I'm just asking if there's a way to start including not just the cost effectiveness as though we're doing this to save money at a house, but looking at, we're trying to find the cheapest way to save the climate. And we want to put these electrification measures up to the test to see, are they cheaper than sequestration at 200 a ton or miracle gas at some other price?
Yeah, if over the next 30 years, the next generation is going to be paying, we're paying what, $1 billion or something like that to fight wildfires, additional dollars to fight wildfires this year. We can imagine that will be 10 billion or 100 billion maybe for our grandchildren in 30 years. So like, how does that $3,000 over 30 years, how does that stack up against all those costs, right? The higher insurance costs and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think from a staff level, I mean, what we're providing is what the council has, requested. And I think a lot of this can unfold in many different ways when we're talking about equity or the availability. And so ultimately, I think that's why you're appointed, is to try to help guide and support the council into making these decisions. And what are the trade-offs? Are we thinking about the immediate cost savings right now, or are we also thinking about these costs in the future? And we can certainly, talk about that and have conversations in the report about the cost of climate change in the future if we don't address it now, and to help you and the city council kind of weigh those short-term impacts versus the long-term impacts.
Okay, I see Commissioner Elkins and then Commissioner Evans.
I just wanted to add on to that, because I appreciate you posing that, or Tom, the way that, because I've really been struggling with that perspective of this report as well, and not being an energy nerd, also having to deal with all of these concepts that are not, and numbers that aren't necessarily familiar to me. But yes, thank you, Tom, for pointing out that the question is not whether this is cost effective or not. The question is, what's the best way to do it? Because we're going to do it, it has to be done. So that's, I would like to see that maybe framed a little bit more in that way.
Does it sound like a dollar per month and $1 per metric ton would help you in your decision making? Should we be including that? It's not a huge change.
I think it's more relatable and simpler, and I think that is typically helpful in these circumstances. The other thing I would say is that the alternative cost is unknown, but you would know that it is greater than what we know today. And so, although it seems like the option that's more affordable is to do nothing, in point of fact, that's not an option. So I think that's also kind of a helpful potential way to think about it. It's sure, we could do nothing. We know it will be more expensive. We don't know what that total cost will look like. And then some of the examples that Commissioner Gaylord shared with the wildfires, I think, are also very fresh for everyone who remembers what last summer for all of us was like here. So I think that that's also a helpful kind of framework, because it isn't as simple as saving money. It's yes, this is important to do and to understand the impact on the equity issues. And as everyone's saying, it isn't as simple as that. Their alternative is not to take action, because we're not trying to, wildfires, all these things will happen whether or not we, hopefully they don't, but it seems like they're happening anyway. So it's like, it's not like doing nothing is really an option. But I know Commissioner, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, yeah, the status quo, it's almost like the report assumes that the status quo is cost neutral, but the status quo is not at all cost neutral. And so
it's most likely more expensive.
Yeah. So I think even if you don't know the exact dollar amount, just like acknowledging that, like, we're comparing everything here to status quo as if status quo was, cost neutral, but it's not.
Commissioner Evans.
Yeah, and point well taken, Tom and Josie. I mean, yes, absolutely. The opportunity cost of doing nothing is, in fact, so extraordinarily high that it's an existential threat, right? You almost can't quantify it. We're talking about the future of our species. And I also think that approaching building electrification with that equity lens, and my personal view is that if we could get the city, I don't know, through taking the user utility tax and putting it up to the amount that they approved it to be at, I think back in 2006, if I'm correct, and using those funds to prioritize retrofitting and electrification of the lower income community, and prioritizing those first or amongst the first, I think would go a long way in doing this right. So, oh, and I was also going to ask one other question of TRC, which is, as you were putting this, so I mean, I think all of these policies that you've proposed here, I mean, we're going to have to probably do all of them if we're going to meet our goals. The point of sale one is particularly compelling, and you guys did a good job of documenting a lot of examples in Berkeley, Davis, Piedmont, San Francisco. Does anybody know, do you guys know, in Menlo Park, are there any other sort of point of sale trigger events that go outside the scope of energy, but are sort of related to some other type of retrofit work that's required at point of sale? I guess the reason I'm asking is because you guys have probably all read all the news articles about all these Bay Area residents buying up all these homes in Lake Tahoe. And I know just anecdotally now at point of sale, I have friends who've purchased homes in Lake Tahoe, and they have to comply, I think within 30 days, to these BMPs, which is it's a water quality related, it's a different issue, and they're not negligible costs. And yet those home sales are not slowing down. And so it doesn't seem to be that, and I'm sure, if we were to put in something similar in our city, we could put guardrails in to protect people who absolutely can't pay for them, so that aren't equity issues. But it just seems like that's working well in Lake Tahoe, although it's for this Bay Area subset. So I was just wondering, do we have any other precedents in the city of Menlo Park at point of sale that are sort of similar, even if they're not energy related?
Yeah, that's one thing we did look at, and I'll answer and then Blake can add to it, but we don't have any point of sale kind of transactions currently. Most of the cities within the San Mateo County don't have. I think Portola Valley may have something, and they just started that. Mostly the East Bay has been more known to do that, and I think cities are entering that kind of era of looking at it as a potential way to expedite changes. But it would, to your point, Commissioner Evans, we'd be starting from scratch to try to first institute some kind of transfer of sale type of mandate or encouragement or just reporting requirements of how much carbon.
Okay.
And to be really specific, I happen to live in Tahoe City. Recently bought a house finally in my life, and so it's actually a time certain ordinance that's checked at the point of sale. Like in 2010, you had to do your BMPs, and then if you don't have them, it gets checked. I kind of like it because the realtors, it's not like forcing it at the time of sale. It's just like you should have done this earlier and you didn't, so now you're paying for it. So it's a little bit of a mix, just to clarify on it. Yeah,
Okay.
it's like
Okay.
time certain check at the point of sale is what that one happens to be.
I heard it was, well, anyways, I don't know. I heard it was
We did
actually
research
like
for it
30
and everything.
days, and then if you don't go over the 30 days, it's like $1,000 a day, or but
Right, but the previous homeowner was supposed to do it in 2010.
Yep.
Is how we like researched it, and
yeah,
I also heard it's not really enforced that well. But really good one to bring up. I'm so glad you brought it up.
So I know Ron Lafrance is here, and I want to hear James's thoughts because I haven't, and before we end, but I just wanted to say, there were a couple comments, and I started in the same boat, and I've sort of changed my mind about this. I started thinking that enforcement was really important, and we should do something like Davis, and we shouldn't put something in place until we have enforcement like that. I've actually completely done a 180 on that, where we do have low compliance on permits right now. But maybe that's okay, because I think one of the really important, maybe the most important effect of policy in this area is sending the signal to the residents and to the contractors that we're moving in this direction. And if we have 5% permit compliance or 10% permit compliance, maybe that's okay to start out with, right? The people who want to get their permits and follow the law, they will do it, and the people who are trying to skirt around it will do that. But some percentage of them, because the contractors will know, hey, this is the law in Menlo Park, some percentage will actually do the right thing, and the ones who are just really adamant against it, they're not getting their permits anyway, so they will continue to do that. And then maybe over time we can find a way to sort of ramp up the permit compliance, but maybe it's first I was seeing the low permit compliance as like a bug, but maybe now it's actually a feature, meaning it could actually be a good thing, and kind of help us lower the public sort of resistance to it.
Thank you. So Commissioner Payne, and I think we're coming right up on 9:40, and I know we haven't heard very much from you, so I'd like to ask you to share.
Sure, yeah, I don't have a new question to add. I just wanted to sort of reiterate my support for some of what has been said. I think the insight of looking at the monthly cost is a very good one. By far the most common language, or the most common way we hear these things expressed, is looking at the upfront cost and then the monthly cost. That's sort of the real impact on a resident. So I think expressing it in those terms is a valuable one. And then similarly, with what you said, Ryan, in terms of when you see these costs presented like this sort of in isolation, it almost implies that the alternative cost is zero, when the alternative cost is very much not zero. And furthermore, cost is an important incentive, but one of several here. So the important thing is for us to figure out the right context to put in that again, the alternative cost is actually astronomical, as we have seen through numerous examples. And then, yeah, actually, I need to reflect on what Josie just said a little bit, but I think that's also a valuable point in terms of the signal is sent even if the compliance is low. And if we don't worry so much about the compliance being low, that keeps the cost relatively low if most of the expense was from the enforcement. So yeah, anyway, those I think were all valuable points, and I just wanted to add my support to them.
Thank you.
Can I jump in for a moment? And I apologize. One thing that I agree that the compliance, particularly for water heaters, is currently low. I agree that if a burnout ordinance is put in, that the compliance will probably go down. The one thing I want to caution people is that the inspections that are associated with gas burning appliances are actually life safety inspections. We, especially in the older building stock, they don't have proper combustion air, or they did have proper combustion air, but it's subsequently been covered. And that is the opportunity for the building inspector to go in and get those situations safe and corrected so that the building is still safe for the occupant to live in. So the lower compliance rate, no one knows what it would be, but it reduces that opportunity for that safety element to be checked and brought up to keep things safe and people alive. And that would be my only comment about that.
So back to the, I think back to the TRC DNB consulting group. I think building off of what Ron said, that a question from us would be, obviously human life and safety is incredibly important as well. And so what in comparable, in the examples you provided, was there any caveat or thought put behind how to ensure, as Ron was saying, that you aren't inadvertently creating unsafe environments due to people trying, or lack of a, thinking they can't accommodate the cost of the permitted experience, so they are going around that and therefore not having an inspection done that would save a life. And so if we're not the first, we may not have done this kind of thing in Menlo Park before, but maybe somebody else has, and what consideration did they give to that? I think if it's a human life and if that's an objection, that will be taken very seriously, and we should thoughtfully consider how we would address that in our solution as well. But I know, Tom, you have your hand up as potentially a parting comment as we conclude the meeting. So what is your final thought?
Just to build on that, I agree with Ron Lafrance about life, health, and safety is a very important thing, and that is really what we are pursuing in the climate preservation efforts as well. Already 9 out of 10 water heaters are going in without inspections, and if this is a priority, if combustion air checking is a priority, perhaps Menlo Park could become the 27th city in California to institute an inspection program on rentals. And so start seeing some of these situations independent of whether somebody gets a building permit. And maybe if you want a point of sale program, have a combustion safety point of sale program too. But I don't want to tie back climate preservation because of the worries that should be addressed in other programs. So anyway, we don't want to throw out the climate baby with the health bathwater.
Well said. Are there any other parting comments? Farhad, you have your hand raised, but I don't know if
I was hoping to summarize some of the recent comments just to make sure I understood.
Sure, perfect.
All right, thank you. So the monthly impact is a key metric, and we'll make sure to add that in, and we will make sure to contextualize it with these broader, much more costly events that are certainly to have higher costs associated with them. The equity guardrail, so even a monthly cost increase, there needs to be an equity guardrail that is a component of that, because that monthly cost increase could be a significant increase for the most vulnerable residents of Menlo Park. And if there is a funding approach, such as the UUT, those would be directed at the lower income residents to install the highest efficiency types of appliances, because those are the types that mitigate the on-bill monthly bill impacts. So any kind of funding mechanism would be catered to them. And the most recent discussion about permanent compliance and a point of sale, I come back to this time certain policy where we're saying by 2030 this needs to be the case, and it's a whether you're getting a permit, whether you're going to sell your property, you can choose not to comply, but you will have to at some point by 2030, and that requires inspections and that it would be a new city staff resource that would be have to be accounted for. So that's how I would kind of sum it up. I just want to clarify if that sounds right or not.
I think that sounded mostly right. The only thing was the bit at the end, and maybe you can't write this because your client is the city, and you can't say most people don't comply with the permits, and so we're just going to look the other way. But I think that is a kind of what we're saying is like, well, maybe we don't want to put a ton of resources into enforcement. Let's explore that, right? Let's look at the pros and cons of that. But like maybe we just let permit, compliance stay where it is. Try to pass the policy because that sends this really powerful market signal that'll bring a whole bunch of people along, more people than currently are getting permits probably, because it'll just send a market transformation signal.
Yep. And also low compliance though sends out another signal. And just today we saw the Hvac, the air quality district, passed the nation's strongest controls on refinery emissions. They have in front of them a proposal to go to a zero NOx equipment for space and water heating. And so if we get low compliance on our programs, Hvac will develop the backbone that it takes to get that equipment off the shelves. And all of a sudden we've got high compliance with our climate action in Menlo Park. So it's like your fifth criteria, which was scalability. There is a set of dominoes and we have to push the first domino and the others will line up and make their moves. But if we all stand around, the dominoes stand and the climate falls.
Yeah, I may have not said that very clearly, and thank you, Commissioner Cabot, for that. So start with these the first couple pieces that the identify, contextualize, and then try to raise funds for the most vulnerable. I was trying to address or speak to the comment you made about the rental housing inspection policies towards the end. It sounds like that could be a consideration because if we have low compliance, then we don't achieve the 2030 goal. But we're going to rely. That's a later measure, so we can push that out several years. Adopt the policy sooner. Got it.
Yeah, or just recognize that you might actually have compliance with the law, but the people don't get the permits. Like we still have 5% compliance on water heaters, but like 40% of people, because it's the law and the contractors know it, are actually complying with the law. They're just not getting the permit, right? So there's a distinction there.
Okay. So we had, is there, we're past the time that we had agreed on. I think we're all set on where we are. And I know that we have not gone through the whole agenda, but I would suggest that we move any remaining items to the August meeting and conclude our meeting at this time. Because it is quite late and we appreciate everybody's time. I know this was a really important conversation, so.
Yes, thank you. And it was very helpful. I appreciate all of your comments, and I know TRC and Blake from DNV does as well, and Myra too. We look forward to having conversations with the subcommittee in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We so we can adjourn the meeting at 9:50 p.m.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.